just order the air? Okay, great.
Thank you very much, because I was like sweating all the way here.
Because when I was in here earlier, it was not so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Jeff. Very good. What's going on? How are you?
Good, thanks for being here. Thanks for
Appreciate
having
it.
us.
Over to-
It's like a small, intimate.
It's gonna be a small,
here.
intimate room, yeah.
Okay.
Should be good. Or are you just going paper?
We were going, well,
Paper's fine.
our understanding is so they have everything.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
They have it available to them electronically if they're,
If they bring their,
The thing is,
yeah, we didn't.
meteor transmitters, that's my fault. I
Well,
have to leave
you
here.
guys have.
But I could.
we have, I just wondering if,
If we should.
maybe we should. Just so they have, in case someone who doesn't know what.
Good.
Someone will want to-
Yeah. Well, we're talking through this like the main.
Yeah.
You don't have to touch it with me.
So,
Let me just,
Tell them, anybody walk out.
get ready.
yeah.
But, and that way,
Or.
if you want to use it, you can use it. If not,
Oh.
you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
Okay? Great.
Hello, how are you? Good, how are you? Good, thank you. Turn on the TVs here.
Yeah, Rick will connect that way if you want. Because I don't know how many of them
Will they actually bring their,
will actually bring their
Computer,
device or.
okay.
Yeah. That way you can just kind of fast forward whatever.
so was there, what was on that wall?
So what was here before were two big whiteboards.
Okay.
These, basically these. And we had the screen that came down, and then we had the projector. The screen was here, I guess. And then we had the projector.
Ah,
So we're getting new carpeting and furniture in this room. And then we're gonna fix the wall. But now we can orient
yeah.
each of the TVs, and no matter where you're at, you can have access and so forth.
Pretty video.
Yeah.
They'll have to come test it, and then I can fix it if it's not.
Yeah.
Chris is on it.
Okay.
Just start the relationship here.
You're running solo tonight now, or what?
Michael's coming.
Michael's coming?
Yeah, so he shouldn't be able, I mean, if Rick or Candace can't access.
Such nonsense. It's just such nonsense. I mean, this is such high stakes here.
Yeah.
Transparency at its best. We've never televised. We never televised workshop. We just have it's not really. But now it's over heights. It's nonsense. Ms. Owens? How are you tonight?
It's like perfect, right? Now, we're all getting warned that tomorrow, I think at 2:20,
Yeah,
they're
there's gonna
having
be
that
a
alert.
national
Yes.
alert, yeah.
So no matter where you are, your phone is going to,
Go off.
at least it's not the middle of the night.
Yeah,
the Amber
there's
Alert.
gonna be this cacophony of cell phones going off,
Yeah.
people panicking. What's going on here?
I know.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, how are you today? Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Of course. Rick's got it in PDF form, so.
He put it-
Oh, he does?
He's got it, yeah, so he'll pull it up and
Okay.
you guys can reference it. And I told Donna, I'm not sure who's gonna have the access to their electronics and so forth, so
Okay.
this way you can drive it and
Okay.
Nice to see on the screen.
make a quick reference. And yeah, you'll be able to see from wherever you are, you'll be able to see it, so.
Okay.
Hey, Mia.
I know somewhere this way. He doesn't have to move this way.
Yeah, why not? Spread out.
Not 100%.
I know, we made it almost through the entire trip and like late Saturday, as we're coming back on Saturday, I can feel just sinuses, you know,
When I
and then Sunday I was just,
Flew back from San Antonio Wednesday. I was at a work conference. My throat was kind of scratchy. And then over the weekend, and yesterday, I was sick, and I had to work from home, but, I mean, the test is not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm already like day 7.
yeah.
I just feel so tired, and then it's this cough, but there's like nothing
Hey, how you
there. And my mom and my brother both had this, yeah, she still has a cough. What's wrong with it?
No,
It's
it's all right.
still, I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of good that it's not there. Just
It's
a
got
little,
spread out.
spread out a little.
Do you want me
but yeah, it's whatever it is.
Yeah, I know, it was, well, the couple we were traveling with, she got it about halfway through. She came down with sinus, just nose running and that kind of stuff, and then her husband got it, Kelly got it, and then I eventually succumbed. But
You guys have
it was, I knew what it was, I could just tell it was sinuses.
Yeah.
So I started some Zithromax and
Yeah,
felt,
maybe,
the next day felt tons
maybe I
better.
should have done that, but I checked just in case, because my mom, she's 75,
Yeah.
so I was like, or just, yeah. I think it was really good, because I had it once, and it doesn't feel like it,
Yeah.
at least not how I had it or how I had it, but I have a feeling it's going to well, but I probably should have just gotten the antibiotic.
Yeah, but you're right.
I mean,
it's not much.
because of that.
I mean, these folks from the audit standpoint are very efficient, so.
I'm going to wait for you because I'm not feeling 100%.
Oh, you too?
6 days, 7 for what? I tested for COVID, it's not COVID, which is sort of. That's why I stay away from the dinner, I was like, at least in here, it's like. Mine. No, mine too.
Those are my little ones. Thank you. Not bad, right?
Are
Do you need to switch over a while?
Can I ask you a question? I'm gonna just put this over here.
Are you gonna drive them then?
There's days I'll trade my kids.
Hi, how are you? How are you? Good. Look at Purple Lady.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, will you test? You're gonna Archway? Wow.
Electricity.
She's got her fun for later. I do, me too. They're my favorites.
I love them.
The purple beer. I love them. That's right.
Tell them to call me. Or somebody call me.
for that, and then. I assume she was working with you, so she and I were talking. Yeah, she did. Right.
Oh, are you just mad at me over there with you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, right, I mean,
Sure, okay.
Playing Mariah is not. It's not being carried away.
That's much as you know.
Yeah.
Whoever sits there gets it. Surprise.
I recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah, your time? Yeah. It's the first time you take a 2 week vacation since, you know.
2 years ago. Oh, yeah. Same couple. Oh, you were with us a couple weeks? Yeah. Did you go to the couple? Yeah, my parents' friends.
I am Chad. Number of years.
Oh, wow. We had that couple that we do spring break together. We did spring break last year.
Oh, hey, Joey.
I don't know anything about it. So she didn't work it out. Oh, by June, right. But do we have, we don't even have a phone in here.
Nobody. But you have to know that's where we're
Moving a call.
All right, she may or may not call you.
Me?
She may or may not
Call me? Okay.
But if we're waiting.
All right, well, I'll keep the phone up here. I've got it up. Okay. Welcome everyone to the Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023 Board of Education Workshop. We have 6 trustees present and 1 lady calling the committee. For 4th one, so she calls in, we'll connect her through. We're going to start with public education. We have 1. Mrs. Tracy Owens. Mrs. Owens, you know the routine here, so you got 3 minutes.
I am here tonight to present the board with a resolution with the hopes that you will place this on the October 17th board meeting agenda. The board resolution in recognition of October 2023 as Dyslexia Awareness Month. Whereas dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin and is characterized by difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. And whereas these difficulties typically are caused by a deficit in the phonological component of language that is unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and to the provision of effective classroom instruction. And whereas secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede the growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. And whereas dyslexia occurs on a continuum of severity affecting between 10 and 20% of the population according to the National Institutes of Health. And whereas dyslexia is the most common learning disability that affects 80 to 90% of all individuals with a learning disability. Whereas dyslexia affects all segments of society, regardless of race, income, educational background, or ability. And whereas through effective dyslexia screening, students with dyslexia can be identified as early as preschool, long before their learning challenges have resulted in learning disabilities. And whereas early identification and intervention is critical to ensure individuals with dyslexia receive focused, evidence-based intervention, allowing the promotion of self-awareness and self-empowerment and the provision of necessary accommodations to ensure school and life success. And whereas literacy is a critical skill needed for educational success, and students who do not read at grade level by 3rd grade are 4 times more likely not to graduate from high school with a diploma. And whereas our district and community will benefit from an increased awareness of the nature of dyslexia, the early warning signs of dyslexia, and and the value of multisensory structured language interventions for students with dyslexia. And whereas greater recognition and understanding are necessary to ensure that individuals with dyslexia living in the Troy School District and all other Americans with dyslexia are accurately identified and provided with appropriate services so that they might lead maximal productive lives. Over the years, I have seen the board place and pass resolutions for National Suicide Prevention, Mental Health Awareness Month in support of gun safety and gun storage. And while all of those issues are important, they do not speak to the learning or have a direct correlation to students' academic success. Instead, focus on social and emotional issues. I truly hope to place this on the agenda, especially since every January you pass a resolution for Board Recognition Month, but seem to not pass resolutions that focus on the children in the district. While I am sure it feels nice to pat yourselves on the back, I think our students, especially those, have opportunity to get recognized also.
Thank you, Mrs. Owens.
Thank you, Mrs. Owens.
Okay, that moves to business services update. Friends from Matt Moran. Hi.
We'll turn it right over to you.
Yes. You see you in 3D. And stay on Zoom, so.
Thank you for having us this evening. You received drafts of the deliverables in your board packet, I believe. And our intention would be to date the audit today, since we're covering this with you now. But our also intention would be just to cover the key points and changes in our presentation that we will be back for on October 17th to present at the formal regular board meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Well, just to start, I know you received the materials. Was there any questions before I start covering the graphs that we can help fix? No?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was
Very
very happy with that.
I printed a copy. It really, I mean, no one really does printed copies anymore, but, you know, the quality and the reporting, there's a lot of work that goes into this by your business office and a lot of writing and updating, so, it's a nice time. All right, just to kick things off, and we have the slides here on the screen.
Okay.
Rick driving?
Right.
Okay.
Hang on. Buckle in.
Don't go too fast. Okay, we'll start with the results of the audit. We are intending on issuing an unmodified opinion on the district's financial statement. So that means the financial statements are free of material statement and they can be relied upon. The same is true for the federal programs audit, an unmodified opinion on that as well. The programs we tested included the WIA program, part of Michigan Works programs, which is a lot of different grants and a lot of accounting and activity behind those grants, education stabilization funds, and child nutrition. Okay, 3 programs this year, which was a lot. No findings or question costs with regards to the grant dollars as well. Good news there. In addition to testing the numbers, we also test compliance with the bond and sinking fund allowable cost regulation and the bid testing that's required in those guidelines. We did not have any issues regarding that, compliance with those programs as well as the numbers and accounting for that. Did want to mention also that the district is required, as you well know, to adopt the budget each year and live within the means of that budget that's adopted. The budget landed very close this year. It's pretty much a break-even year, but when you look at your final budget and where the district actually landed with actual costs, it was very, very close. It was less than $100,000 on a $190 million budget, which was very strong. And both the bond and sinking fund compliance and compliance with the Michigan Budget Act are spoken to in Note 3 in the district's financial statements. Something that was unique in the financial statements this year, and for all financial really, when we look at, the impact of that for Troy, that was $9.1 million. It's good to know that information and be able to communicate that, because if you just look at last year compared to this year, it looks like you received all this additional money, when in fact you have no ability to utilize those dollars. You essentially serve as an agent, it comes in and goes right back out into the system, but it is reflected in your numbers. Also want to congratulate you on being awarded the ASMO Certificate of Excellence for the financial statements for 2022, and having work documented in your financial statements. The district continued to utilize the ESF funds, the ESSER funds, and the federal child care grants. Just wanted to note those are, as you well know, non-recurring. Those programs wind down and will not be,
We're painfully aware of that.
and we go into more detail of that in the next slide.
I can't remember, tell me if you're gonna cover it later, if you go back to the slide before. Talking about the Michigan Works, is there another slide later on that, or is that the only place we touched on that?
No, that is detailed in the federal programs, financial statements, that was part of the.
Right, but it's not part of the slideshow. I just had a quick
No.
question on that, just because I read it in the larger one. And I think that was where you talked about there's a giant Excel spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah,
and
that's
it
what
trans-
I was- I
it
wanted to
trans-
ask
It
about
gets
that,
transferred
yeah.
over, and
We'll
like.
talk about that.
Okay, I didn't know if you were gonna talk about it, because I thought, okay, I wanted to.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
cover the letter after we walk
Okay,
through
all right.
the graphs here.
Never mind.
But this next graph details the federal dollar, the COVID dollars, and what was awarded to the district, what was spent. And so as of right now, or as of June 30th, there's $3.8 million left to spend on the ESSER 3 grant primarily, and that does need to be wound down September 2024. You know, it is taking great care of districts to be careful in how those dollars are spent. With the ESSER funds, you could supplant dollars. That means, what we see, pretty much you're seeing a lot of districts that have increased their fund balance as a result of the grant funds, which we'll show you on a graph as well. But that's pretty consistent, and because that great care is taken, because once these wind down, your costs are still your costs.
Our financial teams were really hard to make sure we're not using those funds for the.
Absolutely, very careful there. All right, Mike is gonna cover the dollars in the general fund now.
So the first slide here is meant just to be a snapshot of the district's two major funds, the general fund and the main operating account. Certainly spend a few slides covering those dollars there. The other major fund, which would be a new fund for this year, was the 2023 Federal Projects Fund. So with the new bond that was passed this past November, the district received about $190 million in bond proceeds, factoring in the par and the premium there that was received. And so you'll see that in this new fund here. Some dollars were spent towards the end of the year on some of those bond-related projects, but overall, I made fund balance for that fund about $186 million. The last column over there, your total non-major funds, that would be the district's special revenue funds, debt service funds, as well as the other non-major capital projects funds, which are the 2019 capital projects funds. So the next few slides are really meant to just highlight the general fund specifically. And the next two here, we'll look at general fund revenue. So the total revenue for the year ended June 30, 2023 came in at about $189 million. And the one thing I certainly want to point out, that Donna mentioned, was that those 147C numbers. So there's the one-time funding of about $9.1 million. But then you also have your recurring $15.5 million. So overall, there's about $24.7 million in these 147C funds. You'll see that as a state source revenue in this pie graph from a revenue perspective. And then as we talk about on the expenditure side, you'll see that as within some of the payroll chart. So I just wanted to again mention that, just given the impact of basically increasing that State source revenue being the largest component at about 68%. Local source revenue coming in at about 21%. The federal revenue included in that $9 million is about $5.5 million of those ESSER education stabilization funds that we talked about earlier. And then interdistrict revenue runs out the remainder at about 6%.
Interdistrict would be,
Act 18, primarily is like Act 18 funding for open schools.
okay, okay. Thanks, Mike.
This next slide here just kind of breaks that down that same pool by some of the state, the primary state and local source revenue. So the 84.5 million or 45% is at state foundational level. So that's driven by your stadium membership or based on your enrollment, and then foundational amount set by the state. We'll talk a little bit about both those metrics on some later slides from a perspective. Property tax revenue makes up your largest local source piece, so that comes in, that's that blue bucket there at about 20%. And then that other state local source revenue at about 30%, that's your other state category, rules included that, so those are 3%. So the next two slides will now look at general fund expenditures that came in at about $189.4 million for the year. This first graph shows it by object, which is really kind of what the service that the district's receiving, or the benefit that the district's getting. You'll see here salaries and employee benefits, the school district being run by people comes in as the largest component, or 82%. Purchase services makes up the second largest component at 13%. That's some of your contracted employees. So all in all, you're looking at about 95% of the general fund expenditures are going to people.
And that, I mean, that has to shift as well, right? I mean, we're always around 95 total. Has there been a shift between the primary salaries and then the purchase services? Or is that still about the same? If you have, at least you might know it too. Is that about the same as previous years, or is there a shift?
Yeah, purchase services is usually right around 13-14%.
Yeah, things are, I mean, it's interesting because when you try to compare year over year to things now, when you look at salaries and employee benefits, because of this lumps of money, so like I can just see historically trying to compare year over year, everything's going to have multiple asterisks on them to explain why is there a big lump, jump.
Yeah, this does
here.
look different, that's why I'm asking it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's
We-
been, I feel like it was like 93,
93,
and then 94,
and now
and
we're
now it's
95.
95.
Yeah.
So it just keeps
I
going
agree.
up, like
Right.
a percent at a time.
Yeah, I think the benefit side is, I think, I want to say last year, Mark, or salaries and benefits went around, I don't know, 80-81%. So there's a little bit of an increase with those $147 but generally speaking, it's.
I mean, the big picture looks the same.
Yeah, and I know for a fact this next slide, it's breaking out by function or across the
Yeah.
departments. All these percent, gotten bigger pool, but from a percentage perspective, they're all within 1%. What we were seeing last year. So direct construction, obviously being the largest, at about 66% of it. One thing this slide does highlight on that is we have the Oakland County average for direct construction for the last fiscal year, fiscal year 22. That came in at about 60.3%. So Troy came in at about 66% this year, certainly we need the high end.
See, I thought Esther might change that in the other schools, so we still maintain
But
our
that's
eight.
what we're-
Yeah. What about
Yes.
Oakland County?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that is a year lag, so I mean, there would be ESSER dollars we spent in 22, but that could potentially change.
But we seem to be consistently at least 5 points above that average, so.
Yeah, and then indirect construction, coming in about 13.6%. It's, library and counselors, so, when you add those two together, about 80%, are all construction related costs. So as we had talked about, state like the largest revenue source being, the foundation allowance set by the state. This slide's really meant to highlight some of the inputs that go on that. So the line graph there is your foundation allowance set by the state, kind of working left to right there. You know, we always include the 2008, 2009 year, all the way on the left in the orange bucket, just to show what the foundation allowance was before, about $400 a people. So, you know, fast forward, it took until about 2019, 2020 to then reach that same funding level from 2008, 2009. And that's obviously not inflation driven, so that's just in terms of pure dollars. So, you know, looking at that trend, you see in 2022, 2023, the $9,874 per people for Troy in 2022, 2023. And then in 2023, 24, I think that new bucket is just going to $10,332 per people. From a per pupil membership perspective, which is those bar graphs, just wanted to note, you know, the 2020-21 year, we see that super blend highlighted there on the graph there. That was, and then you see the 21-22 like a, you know, about a 500 people enrollment drop. In 2021, the state came out with a super blend formula to kind of offset the decline in enrollment that was expected coming out of the COVID pandemic this year. So that's why you see that kind of sharper decline in 21-22. It's really effectively 2 years worth of change.
It is pretty staggering when you think about 2009, your funding level per pupil is only, you know, compared to 2023, $599 more than then. When you think about how the 2 times funding and the money that we lost over that period of time, where other peer districts may have had benefits all of those years, and what you had to do to manage that, was pretty staggering.
Well, I've told anybody who listened that the record-breaking increase this year was below rate of inflation. So ultimately, if we can't maintain at least the rate of inflation, which we haven't done in 12 years, we still have less money than we're going to have to see.
Considering costs increasing, labor
Yeah.
costs increasing,
That's inflation.
and collectively just what you have to absorb. It's nice that there's increases actually now, but it's, you know.
We're operating at about 74% in inflation adjusted dollars, 74% of what we were operating in 2004. So, yeah, we're doing a lot of good stuff.
We switched to LEDs.
Yeah, right. That's how we did it. That's right.
So this next slide is really just for point of reference in comparison to other Oakland County school districts. Just shows your foundation allowance for people for the 22-23 year. And also that teal part just shows you the increase that every district received, which is, you know, fairly consistent across the board.
I do have a question about this, for anybody who may be watching. So when we look at, you know, our peer districts, and that somebody can answer here, you know, when we look at, we get compared to the Washburn and Bloomfield Hills, we receive a significantly lower amount of money per pupil. So, can somebody just highlight what the difference is, about $3,000 per student? Can somebody just explain really quick what that difference is between Troy and Burlington and Bloomfield Hills? Whoever
It's
wants to.
historic, I mean, over time, you know, with Proposal A, when they have went into effect in the hold harmless districts, which you are a hold harmless district, they were considered the higher funded districts. The diversity between the lowest funded and the highest funded back when that was adopted was very different back then. And it's just squeezed over time. And slowly, because of the 2 times funding, the bottom has lifted up, but because we were probably in the mid-funding range when Proposal A went into effect, you've seen the
even compared to Birmingham and Brookfield Hills, we're doing a good job. We look at it, we get $3,000 per pupil less every single year.
You've, and you've had the benefit of an increasing, student population prior to the pandemic, which has been very available. Some of the other districts here have had declining, advance fees as well. But you've had to be very careful in managing within the dollars that you receive because of that. But yes, back in the day, I remember this chart started over here and then went that way. I've heard it termed the donut hole. We're kind of in the donut hole. A superintendent I worked with before, and that was what she called it. And essentially, you were not receiving the benefit of the lowest funded districts. You didn't get the benefit of the higher funded districts. You were don't hold it.
Living in the trough. Living in the hole, that's right.
So I think the next slide, this shows from a fund balance perspective, the district over the last 10 years. And I think this really highlights the fiscal stability that Troy's having, making the right decisions with that, some of that less funding that the other districts are receiving. So, over the last 10 years, you've seen the fund balance, the trend upwards. And, this year was effectively a break-even year for the general fund. We'll highlight that on the next slide. But, over the last 10 years, we see that increase. And the district's been above 15%. One of the main metrics that we look at, the state looks at, is fund balance in terms of general fund expenditures. Troy spent above 15% over this time period, above $20 million in total fund balance during that 10-year period. One thing I want to highlight on this slide and the next slide as well is, you see it's effectively a break-even year, but then the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures went from 19% to 17%.
Yeah,
Is that,
because we inflated.
it's,
Yeah, well, that's, I was
it's-
like, is it because, is it just because of the inflated?
your expenditures are up to $189 million, and a lot of that, remember, not that.
Okay, that's why I just was like, is that just the?
It skews the comparison.
Yeah.
So.
And so, for reference, last year, at a statewide average for fiscal year 22 general fund, for fund balance as a percentage of expenditures was about 20.3%. So last year, Troy about 19%, kind of right on par with that. This year, we would expect to see that, that statewide average decline, just because
Across the board for the state.
just for those
And
expenditures.
will you guys note that in the public presentation, because I think that's important. If somebody who carefully looks at that and say, we maintain fund balance, but, I don't want to confuse people saying we overspent the additional 2% fund balance, when it's really just a function of base.
And the other thing I wanted to know when I looked at this too, it seems like if you're just looking at the charts and you're not, reading the percentages at the bottom, it seems like our fund balance is increasing along the, the absolute dollar value is increasing. The percentage is staying relatively stable. So, it's not like we're not allocating funds to where they need to be, but we're actually staying stable. It's just our expenditures are.
Could we reverse it and chart the percentage and then note the dollar amount down at the bottom?
For me, it doesn't matter, but I just think it's a.
No, I thought the same thing when I
Looks
went
at
through
this,
it. I
It
was
looks
like,
like,
we're banking.
in 2014 to 2023, it looks like, oh, we have extra $11 million, but really, it's a pretty flat.
Well, I want the first glance to see that it's down a little bit as opposed to it's climbing, especially when we get into negotiations. So I agree with you. When I looked at the chart, I was like, at first glance, you go, oh, wow, they're making a lot more money.
Can we make it a line graph for percentage?
I'm sorry?
Can we make it a line graph as a percentage amount and then we'll note the dollar amounts?
But so like, if you just literally reverse what you're graphing,
We can go to 21.2 million.
just do this.
I think, again, the emphasis on the important message is
Yeah.
fund balance is our opportunity to essentially keep the district running smoothly when you have, unforeseen shocks and so on that happen. For the time that I've been on this board, we have never had, a layoff that has disrupted school. I for one am very proud of that, and that's what the fund balance is for. And I know sometimes people like to twist the fund balance to say, it's like we're banking money for,
The ring
something.
is
Yeah,
right now,
yeah.
savings account.
But that fund balance is a real critical, way for us to manage the disruptive changes that, have big consequence to school.
Yeah,
And this tells them.
yeah, this next slide, I think, does a really good job of highlighting that, where like, another metric that commonly gets looked at is weeks of operation or days of operation. So, under the assumption with some of those, you never know what might happen from a state funding perspective, from a federal funding perspective. If there was any significant change, how long is the fund balance in the school district operating, revenue net short or revenue shortages. So, 9 weeks operation for Troy is what the metric shows. So, assuming there's no more funding, just based on your fund balance and your current, cost structure, that's 63 year operation.
I think the other thing that is important to highlight for the fund balance is the fact that, cash flow is required to run, whether you run a school district, a business, or your own household. And, we have never had to borrow money, for those down periods when we're waiting for state payments, because we've always managed our cash flow.
And having sufficient fund balance to manage through the next few years as these federal dollars wind down, when cash flow gets a little tighter, is going to be very important. So you're positioned to do that right now. So just to recap, positive audit results, and we'll talk about the one major program that we tested, but we did note, the complexity around that data and managing it. But, we do also want to thank the business office and Candace and Greg and all the hard work that the business office does in preparing and all the different pieces of the financial statements. The financial statements are management's responsibility. We work with the administration to do the audit, but they take great ownership in the financial statements, which is proper, and we audit the financial statements. So, it's a hurdle every year, and I'm sure they feel good when it's done.
Although Candace tells us they still have reporting to do for the next month.
Yeah, there
Yes.
is a lot of state reporting. We'll
She
touch
can't
on
read
the letter to the board, so this is the end of audit, correspondence to the Board of Education. I know you don't have it right in front of you, but I can talk about
That's
the
fine.
various type of topics that we have. But when you go back and look at it again, we have the final version. See, the first section is really the prescribed wording. It does define what our responsibilities are as the district's auditors, management's responsibilities, and also comments on anything that you as board members should be aware of. Clearly, there would be no surprises here, and there are no surprises. But if we did in fact have difficulties with management, disagreements on accounting standards, things are reported, they would be reported in the first section of the letter. But it's the second section here, the other recommendations and observations, we want to just take a little time. Much of this is related to new things, just wanted to have on the radar. There is a new GASB implementation guide that actually just came out today. Was it this today? No, it was, I'm sorry, the bond and sinking fund guide that came out today. Constant changes, nothing. But essentially this guide clarifies some of the GASB the standards that are out there, give a little more color to some of the grayer areas of the standards. And one of those items is related to fixed assets. So most districts have a policy of capitalization and how you capitalize fixed assets. So This standard clarifies that if you have one-off purchases, like a table and it's $1,000, that you can expense it. But if you buy 20 tables, even though each of them individually is below the threshold, that you have to capitalize all of them in. And much of this is done in practice, but, you know, may want to revisit, and I think you talked about like looking at your policy, you know, eventually making sure that's clear. That doesn't go into effect until this year. Food service fund, the fund balance, it's a standard rule, you know, can't have more than 3 months worth of operating expenditures with the funding, with the school lunch program over the years. I don't have one district who is not violating this rule right now, so it's no surprise. But there is a required spend down plan that has to be put in place. I'll be curious with the full funding of lunches going forward, how that's going to also impact this rule, so.
I keep asking everybody,
Yeah.
what do they think is gonna happen, but nobody knows. That's,
Yes.
yeah.
We'll see. The comment in here regarding the Career Center, the Michigan Works programs, I think there's like 25 or more programs.
30.
30 programs that have
She
to
said
be
for the crowd.
tracked. And essentially, this is just an observation. Anytime we as auditors see a lot of work and manual input into an Excel file.
Portaging, data portaging.
Yeah, we always get a little nervous, right? So, in this case, you know, they do a great job. It is a lot of work maintaining all of the details. And the business office here uses that, summary essentially as a subsidiary ledger supporting the accounting that's being done here, at the district. So just, I don't have a solution, to propose, but just, you know, brainstorming, is there a better or a different system that could be made to simplify this process and streamline it a little more for them at the program level so that it doesn't have to take as much time, but then there's not as much risk of error.
Is the risk just increased error rate again, because
Well,
you're portaging
losing
data, you put-
data,
you miss a
losing
decimal
error,
point,
yes.
okay.
Anyone who's worked with Excel has always had that issue at one time, and so.
So what is the requirement, reporting requirement on, I would say, customer, because it's a pass-through of money? I mean, is some of this driven by what, I don't know if it's called, the customer? The entity that we're passing the money, I guess maybe is it because of how we receive the money and how we
Yeah.
spend the money that,
So
that
because
drives
there's
this
so
requirement?
many individual programs, all the costs and payroll, has to be tracked by program.
Yeah.
And so it's very important, so when we test, we look at individual contracts and make sure those costs that are charged to that contract are correct and allowable. So it has to be accounted for that way. It's like, you know, you look at some of the other grants that you have, they're bigger, a lot more pools of costs. These have smaller pools of costs and a lot of activity.
Do you have any other school districts, you must have other school districts that operate with the Michigan Works office as well, so you
No, we don't.
No.
No, we're unique, Carl,
Oh.
and it's, that we're the only school.
So.
We're one of
Water
your-
for
the
yeah.
agents for
Water, Goodwill has taken over some of them, there's some other fiduciary agents, but we are, there might be one on the west side, or was.
One ISD.
For
One ISD is the
municipalities,
fiduciary agent, so we're a fiduciary agent. I
Yeah.
can tell you that there's more oversight and testing and audits of this program outside of our annual physical audit that they go through. And so it's well documented and well watched over. I mean, I think they have federal and they have state.
It is, they're
type of
primary,
things.
yeah.
But this is more, we're a fiduciary agent, this is more of a political issue, as it's a partnership with Oakland County, Oakland County government than it is anything else, so.
Okay.
But I mean, yes, you're serving in that capacity, but if there was something that was
Yes.
wrong, it's still your finding.
Right. I mean, I like that we're connected to them, that makes sense, it's I just wondered if someone else was doing.
Just
Maybe-
canvas.
No, there really is only one other school district, and it's come up in our testing, and even if you look back at the sources of their funding, if you will, we don't even have prescribed grant codes in the Michigan Department of Education for these programs, because they are not education grants. They are grants and federal sources that do not support students. They support the Michigan Works, which is an unemployment agency of the state of Michigan. So those funds do not actually tie to our student needs. And they are very unique in that they have so many of them. There's about 30 different programs, most of which are federal. And so although they're only auditing WIOA, if you open the single audit financial statements and you look at the CFA, which is the Schedule of Federal Expenditure Awards, that's 5 or 6 pages. Traditionally, we're 2 of that. So traditionally, Troy is 2 pages of that 5 or 6 statement. We use that Excel document that Donna and Michael are alluding to prepare that summary for the audit. All of their payroll, all of their expenditures operate with amongst our processes in a separate fund. But then the folks over there, it's different than our grants here, where we might allocate a body or a person to a grant to work the entire year, maybe 50-50. These folks could work 2 weeks on one grant and allocate 0.5%, and every single work period looks different. And so it gets allocated to this record that we use. But no, to answer your question in terms of who else has this relationship that is moved away from the public schools arena, to be transparent and honest about that.
Do they live in our, do they live in the TC, do they live in the building on Big Beaver?
Or no, they
No.
have their own, over on Stevenson.
They have their own building lease. They lease a separate workspace.
Yes,
George needs it there.
Yeah.
They are, like, it's like Stevenson,
Mhm.
I've been in their offices.
So that's just a note, we'll continue to monitor if there's a better business practice. And if the board wants to have more discussion regarding that program, we can do so.
No, I just thought, I thought if someone else is doing it better, you know, maybe if you see
I
someone else.
think you're
but-
kind of pointed
I mean, yeah.
to others as to how you're
Oh,
doing it.
okay.
That was my understanding, so.
Yeah,
That's the
Waterford School District was the last one, and they also did this as a fiduciary agent for the Pontiac office. And they got rid of it a few years ago.
So I mean, if the municipality was the fiduciary agent, would they have the same problem?
I mean,
I'm
it'd
just
be the
saying, just
same
because we don't have a
complexity.
school district that's
Yeah.
done it, can we ask another fiduciary agent to say, how do you do it? If we have this, what you're saying, and it looks like we're probably doing a better job than anybody else.
I think it's being driven by the reporting requirements of
Yeah.
individual grants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just sounds like.
Sometimes it's be careful of the money that you take, because
And I think it's been with Troy for so long.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
we have some.
You have some legacy.
We have some legacy people
here.
that have been in the ORS system for quite a long time.
Yeah, how much time does it take for our team?
It's a
Rick doesn't like that.
significant- As she mentioned, the CFA is a significant amount of work for any audit, and it's adds significant complexity to Candace's and the team's
That is,
work.
yes, that is probably one of the most significant parts of preparing for the audit, is this particular grant. And then when there is time during, like as Rick mentioned, they are audited probably more than any other organization or program. So there is attention throughout the year to their other audit programs.
And employee services.
And employee services, and just the regular business operations. There's, Rob and Beth would say that they have time as well from that, so I can't quantify how much of our time
It isn't a significant indirect cost revenue relationship to the district. I can confirm
So-
that.
Does the
But are we
district get
funded?
any
Yeah.
benefit?
That's what I'm saying.
Are we
Do we have
funded for those
administrative
hours?
costs?
Like, do we get to bill?
I don't,
As
we
the
probably don't,
We're able to apply an indirect cost rate that the general fund realizes, but that indirect cost rate is on the federal part of their programs, which this year is only about 1%. So we realized approximately $8,000 from operating that program. So in addition to, yes, so no.
It's not.
No, I was gonna say, if you're.
no, it's not
8,000
adequate for the services
No, it
that are
isn't.
provided. But that's a different discussion.
I was gonna say, but that's a conversation, it's different than this, but it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, I was gonna say, we might come back to that.
We'll follow.
Not with you, but we may come back to that, so.
And then the last item, in this section of the letter is, just something to have on the radar. It's related to the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed, and it relates to energy credits. And so, historically, past many years, tax-paying companies, entities could take advantage if they invested in solar panels or electric vehicles, those types of things, of these energy credits. Well, with the Inflation Reduction Act, they broadened it to benefit non-tax-paying entities like not-for-profits and governmental entities in a direct repayment format rather than a credit. So it's really a sector that's missed out on incentive to do more. And many municipalities and nonprofits are doing these things, just not getting the benefit that taxpayers are. So this is something that we're continuing to learn more about. Cost benefit, of course, always has to be evaluated, whether it's worthwhile, but just something to have on the radar with the amount of construction and planning and investment that the district needs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was another area when I read it, I thought, the other part of our conversation, I was gonna be looking at in middle school.
Yeah.
So it's like, if these are available now, these funds are available right now.
Yeah, and they're
where do they come?
clarifying some of the rules around it. And in some cases, it makes sense. I think we just did a webinar on it as well. Some cases it makes sense, some it doesn't. Maybe it's cost prohibitive for a district to have a geothermal something, system where you're not gonna get the benefit from an incentive like this. So it takes careful planning, just knowing it's out there. The last section is really for your reading pleasure. It details a lot of different topics, particularly around school funding and state aid, things to look for in 2024 and going forward. There is some comments in here, topics relating to MINSERS, that program, and the continuous changes in how that's measured with an actuarial study. We saw a big swing in that.
Yeah, should we be
this year.
concerned about that? Because when I read that, it was like, it's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference, and it's all because when they measured it back in 2020, the market was, that day,
realized
doing really
27%
well.
in
It's a
that
point
year.
in time, and then it flipped the other direction. So just nature of the beast, frankly. But it does cause swings like that. And then, excuse me, some other sinking fund legislation and many different topics to update you on.
Yes,
On the X budget.
the sinking fund changes though are not retroactive, so you essentially, the next time we could do that is when we renew the sinking fund. And what
Yes.
year is that?
27.
Did we say 27, 28 was
So
the
do
year?
we have to change our language around that, or it's just if
I think
anything
we will,
passes at that point?
we'll have to work with legal on what it needs to look like, but we'll want to capture what we can
Okay.
to give us that flexibility.
But that, I just was wondering, like, when can we do that, and that's, so it's 27.
We were the first ballot initiative to include the technology component.
Yeah.
So, because
Yeah.
that happened in 2017, that's when we passed it, so it was a 10-year millage. And we'll go back out. And we'll want
I'll
to
be dead by
incorporate
then.
that
Doesn't matter,
language.
but okay.
What's that?
He said I'll be dead by then. So, okay, 2027, okay.
Yes.
No. It's not.
We appreciate the opportunity here to work with your team for the district, serve the board of education and great results this year again.
Thank you. Are there any questions? You know, thank you for.
Thank you for interrupting. No,
Oh,
that's, I mean,
like,
that's it, like,
I was
you
gonna-
let us, we just, I feel like we asked the man to come on.
Yeah, we do. But, yeah, thank you for the part there. And obviously, we have to compliment our team here and, you know, another flawless year here. I said, we're not, I told my wife when I came here, they're not gonna get their heads to the doors. They're gonna be not get another year without any adjustments. But we're really, obviously, we rely very heavily on this team and we're really happy that you're here and proud of the work that you're doing. So, and I appreciate your team coming in as well.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Candace, for all the work you did.
Oh.
Because I know that's a lot of writing, it's
Yeah.
your work, so thank you.
Thank you.
Do we want to move on? We're moving to bond.
Okay, so this is probably a brief presentation just because we've all had an opportunity to see some. This will be very similar based on any feedback we get to what we want to show the public in a couple weeks in the board meeting. So we have, first thing we want to orient the board to, and this isn't meant to necessarily be legible, but that black box represents where we're at today. If you recall, when we laid out the bond schedule, the preliminary schedule back in December of '22, this is kind of what it looked like, and this is our document that we keep tracking on where we're at. So we're in the second quarter, or second half of the '23 year, and a lot is going to happen between now and probably February or March as it relates to the approvals going to be needed to move the projects forward. Looking at it a little bit differently, just breaking down the 4 projects, again, we're looking at playgrounds, furniture, athletics, and Smith Middle School are the 4 primary things we've been focused on. We've had an opportunity to talk to most of you regarding some of the projects, and we'll highlight those here in a minute. But it's important that the box there is the next 2 months, next 2.5 months, where you can see the red highlights. Again, I'm not asking you to read it, but the red highlights are what pertains to decision-making times or board actions or cabinet actions. So in December, we can anticipate bringing the playground awards to you for the first 6 elementary schools. Pilot furniture is ongoing. We'll continue to work through that. Athletics, we're also in design development and getting ready to issue the RFPs for that work. And then Smith Middle School is going to be a phased approach. We anticipate the first package coming to the board in end of January, beginning of February for approvals, and that will be the initial package to start the steel and stuff to erect the building. So, and you can see the blue boxes are the exciting components. That's when we start. That's when the projects start. We'll start seeing action within the community. So, given that, that's the overall landscape. We wanted you guys to know that. We wanted to also, we'll have this for community consumption as we move forward. But the next part is the exciting work that's been done. The first being the athletics. One of the first projects that we wanted to get started with is the athletic complexes at our 2 primary high schools. The first one being focused on the Troy High athletic facilities. The project scope has been identified now. We've worked collaboratively with our athletic teams, our administration. Christine's really led this effort, and we are planning to do a complete overhaul of the exterior athletic facilities at Troy High. This is just a picture of the conceptual design. We're really further along in that process now, where we're going to put a practice soccer field where the current softball field is, and then that field that really just collects a lot of rain right now, and is really not used for much, is going to be a new soccer, multi-use field, really. It's very important to highlight that, actually. It's gonna be multi-use, it's gonna be lined for multi-use, and it's gonna give us a lot of flexibility for our athletic programs moving forward. So we're very excited about that addition.
I think it's important to, I mean, when you just said that it
Yeah.
always floods. to
Well,
know that
so
can
as
put
we
in
move,
drainage.
further south on the property, the baseball fields, were maybe the main driver of this. We had continual challenges, or we have continual challenges with those, so this is really a motivating factor for, these changes. We are going to, build that complex, more south on the property, where we're putting the JV and varsity, softball here, and we'll turf the varsity fields. The JV fields will be grass, and then the baseball complex will be here, down on the southern end of the property. So the baseball field again being turf here, and the JV field there. This part here, I didn't blow it up in another side here, but this is all, it's a facility, right? Now we have exterior bathrooms, or we have bathrooms to support it. We have storage units to support it, and then we also have access to this, this concrete sidewalk here, to access the site appropriately. Right now, if you go over there, there's not accessibility as accessible as we'd like. We are excited that we redid the turf on the field this year, so that's done, and the kids are getting to experience that. And then the tennis courts, currently, we're still in talks with the Troy Racquet Club and trying to work out that deal. If not, we are planning to install our own new tennis courts in 2025. So that would be some of the second phase to this project. But this, again, pending final design, pending RFPs, and your acceptance of the bids, we will get that work started in the fall. I'm sorry, in the spring.
Would the soccer field, would the auxiliary fields be done in time for kids to play fall sports?
I believe that's the intention is right.
Because that's gonna be a big deal if we're relocating.
Especially for Smith, if we're gonna rely on that auxiliary field for Smith football.
So,
Yeah, that's what I mean, like
So when we-
timelines isn't.
when we bring the award, we will bring the construction timeline with us. Right now, as we develop the project, we will need to really hone in on what the construction timeline looks like once we have a final project design. But with the softball field being up there, we're gonna have to wait until that softball season's over
Right.
next year in the spring, so it wouldn't be until really late spring, early summer where we'll be able to start those projects. We'll have more detail when we bring the award.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that Shane Hines at Troy High and Bob, before he left Athens, and now Todd, have been involved in all of the conversations in terms of
And Tim.
in preparation for making sure the coaches are aware that if there are alternatives that need to be in place, then they're in place and ready to go.
Yeah, there's a logistical piece of all of these projects that we have to work through and make sure, and we'll make sure you're informed of those, especially when we bring the list.
Can I just try for everyone's kind of saw this individually, is there anything that I'm really excited about? I thought this is just such an improvement over what they have right now.
It's exciting.
So looking at Athens High School, we have a limited scope there, and that's strategic in nature because we don't know the scope and sequence of the new addition to Athens High School, so we have to wait until that's built out a little bit better, and that's gonna be probably a year or two before we really understand that. But there is some work that we wanna do to make sure that we are addressing needs all around the district, and those first two things are gonna be the tennis courts and the auxiliary or practice soccer field. Same thing we did at Troy High, we're doing here, we're going to make it a multi-use, multifunctional field to give us flexibility amongst all of our sports. And I believe the fine arts is gonna be able to use this, but in both spaces, so band, actually, Christine did a nice job bringing our fine arts, our music programs into the full and making sure that they have a voice in the design as well, so they were able to be part of that. That's Athens High School. Then the hallmark of the entire bond project is Smith Middle School. The first thing we want to show you, and most of you have seen this again, is the orientation. Again, our hope and desire is to orient this to Livernois. We are in the process of trying to acquire the necessary property in order to do that, and those conversations are ongoing. Absent that, there is possibility and availability, but we are moving forward with this plan. And so this is just a layout of it. This was where the football field and athletic complex would be on Smith Middle School. As you can see, it's directly over the current building. As we know and we've reported, we're going to need to use that building for the next several years as we also renovate Larson and Bowling Park middle schools, and we're going to use that as surge space or whatever the space we're calling it. But we're going to be using that building, so we will phase that athletic component in later. Again, when we talk about logistics needed, all of this is a logistical exercise as well as we figure out how to move kids throughout the district and move our athletic programs to accommodate the needs.
Yeah, I was thinking track and field was the part that I was like, what are we gonna do? We don't have that. We didn't build an extra track, and.
So we are
high school
in,
was using those tracks.
we're in discussions. There's a baseball field down here, and there's some temporary things we can potentially do. We're also looking at what the possibilities are off-site to accommodate the programs as well. So it's gonna probably be a combination.
We're hoping to put in a straightaway, at least to be able to set up blocks and
Okay.
some of those hurdles.
So just looking at the two-dimensional floor plan, again, a lot of collaboration and a lot of work, really since November of last year, or even before when we were talking about what we're doing. A lot of work has gone into developing this building and really a collaborative effort, again, led by Christine and her team, in really getting the building that we want. And Dr. Chesky has mentioned this several times, we're planning a building for 50 years. So there's no more exciting work. I can tell you, we joke about coming out of the pandemic, where we're all drained from managing that nuance to being able to really vision public education for the next 50 years. That's probably the best rebound we can have. So we're excited about the work, we're excited about the product, and we're excited about the conceptual designs that that have been created with our professional teams, TMP and the other fielding have been instrumental in getting us to this point. So that's the two-dimensional things. There's a lot of detail in there, but I think the important thing is to understand that there's a design based on a lot of collaboration. We wanted to get to the exciting stuff. I know most of you have seen this in the renderings. We just pulled a couple here to really highlight what we're doing or what we may see come to fruition here in the next couple of years. This is just the exterior of the main entry. If you see Smith Middle School now, there's no real main canopy that introduces you to the building and says, I'm here. But this certainly highlights that. You can see off to this would be the office suite off to the left here, main entry. Then you have the art component and then the music. And yes, that would be an intentional design of the piano. So real excited about the opportunities, and the architects I think are having some fun with this. So the entry on what would be the south side of the building, I think would be student entry. Bus loop. So this is where most of the kids would come in, and you can see the main entry out here to the north. Looking from just the exterior of what the potential learning community could look like, again, inside the building, you would be directly into the learning community areas. And then looking at part of the guiding principles, if you will, or whatever, is looking at how we can better utilize exterior space to facilitate learning. And there's been a lot of collaboration in that. So we're extremely excited about those potentials as well as we move throughout the finishing of the design and getting the construction documents prepared. Just another view of tell you, down to the very breaks and finishes that you see, these discussions are being had, and it's really powerful and exciting. So this would be walking in from the main entry after you pass the first hallway, I suppose. You would be coming into the interior commons area where we have the cafeteria, really multi-use space, and fairly grandiose, but you have media center off of it. And then
Food servery.
food servery. So this would be a main focal point as you enter the building and find your way through it.
I think one of the nice things about this building, and we spent some time in, as a board, you reflected in Hunt's Guide, the importance of having public spaces and private spaces in this building. And so what you can see here in the way it was designed is that our public spaces live in the front of the building. We have to pass through those to get to our more private learning spaces where our students would be. It also allows us to then host things differently in a building where we have spaces where we can have family and public, and a nice, more quiet space for our students off toward the back. So this is one of those public spaces right off the beginning that moves us back into the learning community directly behind it.
This is a view from inside the actual learning community. Again, a lot of things are happening within this. There's what we would traditionally call classroom spaces. There's teacher facilitation spaces. There's small group spaces. And then there's the commons area in each of them. I believe we're talking a couple thousand square feet per.
2,000 square feet in that area.
And just the learning community. And again, we'll get into kind of the furniture concept as we move throughout the bond, but flexible furniture and really creating space where we facilitate learning in different ways.
Each one of these learning communities is designed to be able to support between 110 and 150 students.
Just another view. So that's Smith. That's just to highlight the teaser, if you will, regarding the months of work that have gone into that. So we have athletics, we have Smith. The next thing we just want to show you.
And before you get to the timetable then for Smith.
Breakdown.
When do we approve final design?
We will approve final design in the next.
Is that, that's going to be before the end of the year, right?
Yes.
So we'll go to bid.
Go to bid, February will be the
February.
first package. This will be done in probably several packages. The first one will be the steel package.
And then break ground in the spring.
And break ground in May is current.
Will we break, are we going to wait, the demo of the pool? Can we break ground before we demo the pool? Is the first thing we have to do, demo and have the experience? Is that?
We can probably break ground. We are in the process of getting that demo figured out.
Because I was just thinking
So
that would be really nice, obviously, if we could delay that until the kids are out of school, but
there's a
we
lot
can't
of
delay the
dirt
start.
to be moved.
Yes. A lot of stuff to happen before
A
that.
lot of stuff
Okay.
to happen before we put a piece of steel in the ground, is my understanding. So we're still, again, the same question, we're still looking at the construction timeline and all of that as we try to final design.
Have you, in terms of conversations, is this going to require the underground drainage systems like the preschool had, where we're burying giant?
So that hasn't been.
When you were talking about moving dirt, because that was one of the things in the Niles property, was like, wow, we buried a huge infrastructure underground to keep that. Too wet, yeah.
I would anticipate we like they're going to have to.
Given the
Maybe
floodplain
do
there.
a mix of both, given the amount of dirt we have to move, given the slope of the actual ground.
Oh, it's the grade that has the issue?
The grade, yeah, we've got, I think they said.
From west to east on that side, it was close to 10 feet.
10 feet, yeah.
Oh.
If you stand in the parking
Right.
lot at Smith and you look out on the Livernois, the cars pass at your
Above your head.
at your forehead.
Oh.
So
it's about
you
10
wouldn't
feet.
notice it unless you're actually.
No, I never really thought about that, but,
So,
I mean, I know that's the Martell thing. Martell is down in a valley from the road, but yeah, Smith is in that same valley.
And we're currently working with Okanagan, that's a county road, so
Yeah.
we're working with them on traffic studies and potential expansion. So there's a lot going into the project,
So
Other
you're
than
gonna have like
just,
a piece of plywood,
stuff we just.
clean fill wanted.
Yes. Right. So,
I can't even imagine how many
Left
left.
side road.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's part of our job, but what I used to is that is one side road.
Yeah.
That's gonna go into making sure that it drains
Doesn't
properly.
fly.
Yeah, because it's,
Right.
if, I don't wanna put $1 million in the.
We'll have to do the same thing, right?
And so when we get into conversations, we may as well just tip it off now, when we get into conversations about, you know, cost versus estimate and all of that stuff, we have found in most of our projects that the site work is largely unknown. There's certainly a healthy allowance in there, but when we talk about, looking at potential expansion of roads or access to the site or, the myriad of different site development opportunities that exist both at Troy High and at Smith, there's cost components to that that are going to have impacts on overall project budgets. And we're evaluating all of those options and making sure that we're as responsible as possible, but get the outcome that's desired. So,
I wanted to ask, you know, when you present this next time too, earlier we talked about the Inflation Reduction Act, and you know, that there could be some money for things like solar panels and, you know, for other heating and electrical sources. So we've spent a lot of, you know, we've given feedback and we've looked at the internal design of the building, but we haven't talked too much about, some of the things like, you know, whether we're looking at, you know, the availability of putting in solar panels and some of these other things. So, I know you can talk about it now or, you know, have some more information on that.
yeah,
We need to call on geothermal first.
we're gonna make that call actually, this week, and there won't be any turning back because it's such a critical component to the design. We're evaluating two very highly efficient systems, two different, one is a geothermal field, and the other is a water
Cooling tower.
Cooling tower. And again, both are marked improvements to what we're currently doing. They will both have components that are eligible for certainly the original DTE and consumer rebates, based on the efficiencies. The IRA, I've sat through a couple, seminars about that and the opportunities, knowing that this board's disposition on projects such as those. We're gonna take advantage of the opportunities that exist. For instance, if we can do a geothermal field, we're gonna go after all the IRA tax deductions or credits, whatever we can.
IRA is what they were referring to.
IRAs. The other place I'm looking for opportunities, and we just aren't a priority district, which is a challenge, is in the area of electrifying our fleet. So those are opportunities, we continue to exist, but when Don talks about, you know, the cost analysis, you know, we have to take into account that.
Sure.
Electric buses are 3.5 times more expensive than a diesel bus right now.
Yeah, I'm more looking at now, you know, we're looking at a building that we're building for the next 50 years, so, you know, if there was ever a time to.
It's never easier than when you're building the building to get this stuff.
To do that, so we are down to 2 systems in which they ran the energy models on both. We have the data, we're looking at the paybacks, we're looking at a myriad of different variables along with, again, going into the unknowns of the site. You know, we just don't have a full picture of what it would look like to put 150 wells in. So we're weighing all that, but the decision point is really this week, and it will be part of our overall recommendations when we bring the final design. But it'll be pretty firm because they've got a design. They're designing the rest of the building around it. For instance, if we go with the heating or cooling towers, we would need extra space in the boiler rooms. So we would need to add a couple hundred feet, and that all has an impact and all of that. So we're evaluating all of that, but we will take advantage of anything we can within that area.
So do the architect and the engineering company have the environmental sustainability expertise to be able to guide us and lead us, someone who knows about certification,
They do. TNP has a whole branch of sustainability. They've been and they've presented to our sustainability committee. They've been partners with us, and that they've done a nice job working. I think they have the expertise as well as our mechanical engineers sat with us they've sat with us several times, the last week in particular, and we had those discussions where they ran the energy models. They've done several of these projects, specifically geothermal, not only on K-12 but other buildings. And we're leaning on their experiences, we're pushing them, we've had exhaustive conversations, and we're continuing to look at all opportunities, not just with our mechanical, but in other areas as well.
Is lead certification off the table? That's a two-step there.
For the actual building?
For our two new
itself,
buildings.
we have not explored it to that depth, but that's something we can.
Well, you ought to at least have an eye of what is it?
It's basically how it's energy efficiency. It's all
The discussion of sustainability is gonna come up in our finishes as well.
Yeah.
What type of finishes we're picking and stuff like that. So there may be opportunity. I think we can ask that explicit question.
Because you're right, I'm sure they have a lead certification expert. But
They've got
I don't
guys
know,
there.
and again, from my perspective, it's like, as long as we can show that useful life of the building, we can pay off that investment, or there's a reasonable break-even point on that, then why not do it? It's a 50-year decision, so. But I don't know, I mean, I know a lot of certification, there's a lot of money in that, and we may not have the ability to do that, so.
Yeah, that's it. We'll take that back to our bottom cabinet team.
Yeah, but the architect or the engineering company should be able to walk you through.
This is what you would
This
need.
is what you need,
Yeah.
because they do food certified
Yes.
buildings for other clients.
Very excited about the design. I just think it was like, and appreciate the evolution that we saw between some of our first conversations and the last drawings. So.
Is there a example of what you're looking at in real time, a school that we can walk through and say, yep, we're going to have that, but we're not going to have that, and it'll be at this level, like Bloomfield Hills High School, or we're going to be doing something here, because 50 years from now, we don't know where the technology is going to go precisely, but we're on that track that says we can do this, but now it's going to look a little bit different. Something we can say, yep, on our visit, we looked at something like that, and it's something that we can discuss in real time. I don't want to repeat myself, but that's how it works.
So Gary, we actually had some really great site visits with, when we were thinking about just design concepts. We went to Hall Prairie and visited some of their recent designs to look at what is it going to feel like, how big are these hallways? Is this what we're looking for student lockers and how they're set up? West Bloomfield Middle School was a great example. It's the most recent one, right on the street there. It gave us an idea of kind of scale, right? We were thinking about how big of spaces do we need and what are we looking for in the larger design concept. Now we're refining those conversations and having conversations about where can we go visit to look at finishes. So Novi has some great work going on at Meadows 5-6 building, and TMP is actually doing that work. So Michelle Kearns has been an incredible asset for us because she's in a lot of different districts doing different things. So she's able to say, oh, that floor is here. That's what you're talking about if you want to see it. Or she'll actually just stop by and take a picture of it and then bring us that picture. So we're hoping to visit Novi and the work that they're doing at Meadows to look at some of those finishes. We're hoping to go to visit the Northville building that was just finished because they have some other areas that we're kind of mimicking. So there's not a place that has everything that we want to have, but there's things that have pieces.
How much work does our director of security have for input to make it safer? Again, projecting 5-10 years from now, where we don't know what is out there for the bad guys, but we want to make it safer for our students.
So when we look at guiding principles, safety, sustainability, we're both ones. And we actually negotiated as part of our contract with security consultants to include the bond safety assessments and recommendations. And as Jason Russell and Todd have both been consulted with on the design, they'll continue to be a iterative process, and they'll continue to look at, not only have they looked at the exterior conceptual designs and such, but they will also look at interior opportunities, as well as process and practices as we open the building as well. So, they are instrumental, in what we're doing, and they have a voice at the table.
And products and finishes.
And product.
That'll be a big part too, right? They, when they're talking about not only where our safety and security doors are, but what are the, what are the coverings that we're maybe putting on our windows or not, right? Like how are we using our different spaces to ensure that there's safety throughout
And
them?
for power outages in the area that says, well, we get a notice that it's out because power's gone, will we be self-sufficient in these buildings?
So one of the major things overall, we have to find redundancy in our system, or increase reliability. So whether it's through generators or not, Rob and I continue to be in discussions about how we provide a more reliable system. Certainly, we will use this opportunity with the new building to figure out how we can do that most effectively and efficiently, and that will be a priority as well.
The one downfall of the news middle schools will never get a day off. Everyone else in the district, no, but.
And as you look at West Bloomfield Middle School, because everybody's held that up as the gold standard lately, what do you think we're executing better than they did?
I have lots to say, and I'll say it as kindly as possible. I think there's really incredible spaces at West Bloomfield that, well, first of all, their learning communities are scaled much larger than ours. So when you walk in, they're about twice the size of what we're hoping to set up. And so I think we were really intentional in wanting to have spaces that were a little bit more intimate than those. It's also very sterile when you walk into the entrance. It was created with a different expectation for shared space. So when you walk into West Bloomfield Middle School, there's locked off doors and a 9-foot hallway that are locked off again before you enter into their beautiful media center. And so what we've really talked about is trying to create a warm and welcoming environment once you go through the safe and secure spaces, which are important in schools, but that we don't have a big, they have a grid of hallways. We've tried to, we didn't have the budget to have hallways that were 11 feet that were gridded all around the building, right? We didn't have the square footage to use in hallways. And so the first thing that we noticed when we visited there was a lot of square footage in hallways. And so what you will see, the designers were incredibly intentional in trying to make sure there was wayfinding, but that was usable space. Because long hallways eat up square footage and cost us a whole lot more. So that was I think those are two things that to me stand out right away, that I think we might be doing better. Some of the things we're envious of that they have that we hope for is they have some really incredible outdoor spaces like for basketball right outside of their gym. So for outdoor basketball during lunch hour, for kids to be able to go out. So we're thinking about those things as we complete the site development.
I just asked that because that was something with the Novi preschool. You know, we walked through the preschool and we saw things we really liked, and we saw things we didn't like. You know? So it's
They also have
something
garage doors in all of theirs.
Yeah.
So we will likely not have garage doors. Ours will be sliding doors. So one of the things that we noticed in the garage doors and had conversations about was because of the way a garage door opens, the acoustical panels in a classroom have to be shortened, right, by about 6 feet. So when the garage door comes up, there's a bay for it to pop into, which then creates a different sound in the classroom.
Right.
So this way we'll be able to, we won't have a garage door, we'll have a sliding door, and we'll be able to have our acoustical panels go all the way across.
One of the things I really liked about the design was the ability to cordon off different sections of the building for different events and be able to secure areas for public use without allowing access, to other parts of the school. There were just a lot of really clever things integrated in that design.
So the last thing that we want to show you, a lot of work is being done. We're going to create beautiful spaces throughout this district, but what we put on them is going to be equally as important. There's been a lot of research, a lot of study, and our architects are also experts in this area. Chris and Christine's had an opportunity to engage, kind of at the national level as it relates to how we first ones of this, we have 6 elementaries, the 6 that aren't getting the playgrounds are gonna get the new furniture, and then vice versa the following year. But Kendra and her team put together this video that is going to be released later this week. And we wanted to make sure you guys are the first to see it.
Trying to watch it.
Is it spinning? I don't know. No, this one.
No, I know that.
It was on
It was on
Instagram, right?
Instagram,
Wasn't it on
yeah.
Instagram
Was it
earlier?
Instagram?
Did you see it already?
No, I've been joking because my internet's been down, so it's, I watched it spin and it was like, I give up, they'll show it to me tonight.
Maybe.
Maybe, or maybe they won't, you
Yeah,
know.
let's see this.
Is that just a picture? It doesn't look like it's a link.
You have it, Kendra?
Wonder if we can find it.
Go to me.
Yeah, look at it. Flash each.
Yes. I'm trying to spin.
Just move the image out of the way. Slide that way. It's over there.
Don't save. You're at the door.
I'm trying.
There we go.
We want the students to be most comfortable in their learning environment. And so giving them options of where to learn and how to learn within the classroom can hopefully help them to reach their full potential.
The fifth graders come in every day and they choose a new seat. And then as the day gets going, they're able to move around and choose where they're most comfortable. So it just gives the students a lot of choice and really lets them own their learning.
They're able to find a place where they're comfortable, and if something isn't working, like maybe they are distracted, they can just pick up their stuff and move to a place that works for them, whether it's laying on their belly, standing up, fidgeting on a stool, anything that they want to do to make their learning work for them, they can. There are conflicts that arise, but they're very everyday, real-life conflicts, and it provides opportunities over and over again for kids to navigate different situations and think about how they could do something differently, or how to compromise, or reflect about what's the best spot for me and how do I know what's good for me.
We had a great discussion at the beginning of the year of what is a good, successful choice for the day and what might be an unsuccessful choice. Fifth graders, lower L students, they understand where they can work best, and so allowing them to be part of that conversation and the choice has really opened my eyes to the whole pilot furniture and just giving them that ability to choose.
When you have furniture that looks more like things that you find at home, or things that you might see at a coffee shop, or other places where learning might take place, they know how to then navigate learning in different situations. And it doesn't just become learnings for school and other things are for home. I think about my students as people and who they are going to become. And when I think about what they can do in their life, if they have the autonomy to choose what is best for them, then they are going to know what is best for them when they go into the workforce. And they're going to be able to find spaces where they're able to be writers, be readers, be mathematicians, without a teacher there to tell them exactly what to do.
So Chris, what are your observations so far? How many pilot classrooms do we have going right now?
24.
24. So is there anything else you want to share that you've seen as you've, or comments you've got heard back from staff?
Well, first of all, I'm excited that we're able to pilot. I think that was a really good recommendation from TMP. They really encouraged us to think about doing so versus just buying things, right? And I think our teachers have learned so much more. It's not just about furniture, it's about the space. And it makes me think how it all connects to what we're going to talk about next with Portrait of a Learner and how we design our space. You know, we're leaning into our values. Our teachers are reflecting on that a couple times a month. We're putting a lot of work into the learning side of things and then trying out. So it's not just about the piece of furniture that may or may not be working. It's about Marie Woodman and Natalie Steen is running around and working on job embedded PD and thinking about ways they can arrange things differently, getting kids involved with that. Kids are actually doing assessments and they're giving us feedback on what they like and don't like and what works for them as collaborators in classrooms and things. So I think it's incredibly exciting and thorough. And we look forward to bringing you some more information about that through the accountability plan in November. Just kind of through the student lens, I'm most excited about how the kids have been reacting and how their voice has been captured.
Any surprises?
And I think what I'm most excited about is the inclusive teachers reflecting. We picked, not just the brand new excited teachers,
Pick any teachers who were like, yeah, all right, I'll do it.
Right. So some of the reflections have been extremely powerful about kids in inclusive spaces, that students in categorical programs, for instance, that are being more included because they can be in a chair that wobbles or rocks, or they're staying in lessons longer, and so and being able to collaborate and be part of an environment with their peers. So it's really powerful to see people reflecting in that way.
Are all our setups from one supplier, or do we have multiple suppliers?
No, there's several. Just like our preschool, there was about I think we have 80% of one vendor, and then just kind of a hodgepodge of other things. Kieran Senian works really hard on
within the vendor. Then, even that 80%, do we have different setups in the classrooms, or are we piloting 80% the same way?
Oh no, all different. Teachers were able actually to totally design their own space. They were able.
All these are different.
Right. We narrowed it down to I think there were 6 different packages, so we won't have 6 different choices for everyone. It just has to be. We'll whittle that down again for the masses.
That's what I was going to say. So once we've settled, teachers still will have an option, 2 or 3 options.
There'll be some choice in there, right? Exactly.
Some choice.
We can't.
You can pick the color.
Yeah.
Not the color. No, not the color. Sorry.
Not that either.
Okay.
But I think our teachers are taking it very seriously. They represent that grade level, and they're working to inform. So there'll be an element of choice within that, but just realistically speaking, throughout 6 different buildings and many different classrooms, that just being able to be realistic about those.
Is our thought that we would have a bank of furniture so that as we have turnover with teachers, a new teacher comes to the classroom, says this isn't quite right for me, will we have, it almost feels like we would need some extra furniture to be able to change out.
One thing the group is working on is basically like a handbook. So when a new staff member comes in, we're talking about what does that first grade room look like. Okay. So, the stools are there, so for the philosophy is kind of, we're able to reiterate that, and it's going to take a lot of time with our staff, about 8 to 12 months to really be able to get everyone on the same page with learning, and we'll be preparing for that into the next year. But the bank piece, I don't want to say rank it around Rick, but we do a good job, I think, lower level, upper level, and then of course in the secondary schools, to be able to have some element of choice.
So is it more around different ways to rearrange the same set of furniture pieces? Or is it actually different sets of furniture pieces?
It's more the rearrangement.
Okay.
So if kids are in number corner, how are they going to rearrange quickly the furniture to orient around where the teacher's mini lesson is?
Okay.
Those types of things.
I just wanted to try to get
different in secondary, because some, our art teachers are going to have different setups, our science teachers are going to have different setups, but they're engaged in, so the next 2 weeks will be the time frame for selection of what those kind of kits and parts look like for us to put those together. So like at Baker and at IA, they did what I call the progressive dinner. They went from classroom to classroom of pilot. They have 4 pilots at Baker and IA. They have 4 classrooms.
Yep.
So they walked into each classroom and had a menu. So they walked in with the whole English department. They had a menu of here's all the things that are in this classroom. Let's try them out and test them and talk about how they work with us as an English team, how we would teach into this, and then they could give feedback on here's how it meets my needs. This is what's missing from here. So it's direct feedback to our designers so that we can then help put it together. So similar to how like grade level kits might exist, we imagine that we're gonna have kids that are maybe like humanities based and science based and
Yeah, I'm curious to know
with
the
choice
science,
within.
the science side, is that gonna change our design of science classrooms in New Athens? I mean, because I know you've got water tables, right, and gas, those are kind of locked down, but are there new designs for science rooms, or are those gonna stay more traditional?
There's a lot of different designs.
Isn't there even for science rooms? Okay.
And there's different philosophies like perimeter labs versus peninsula labs versus, so the different ways that we can get into
Right, so
that.
we'll see
So
that
we
in
get
Smith.
ready. Yeah.
We're gonna start to see that
Okay.
evolve at Smith.
Oh, okay, all right. Good, so even that is not, so all of this is in flux then? Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, thanks all.
Yeah, do you want to take a break?
A quick break here?
Yes, please.
Yep. You're gonna check? There's Peter and everyone else. Show me in the second half of the meeting. Hard candy pieces. It's like, I'm talking. Oh, no, I do this with peanut and M. I love peanut and M. Show me the
Always going into the brownie.
One piece of feedback, on the very first slide, you have the middle school color coded to what high school they're gonna go to. But considering Baker and Smith both split, can we not color code the middle schools to the high schools? Because like right now, the very first slide on the bond, it has Baker and Larson colored to go to Athens, and it has Bolden and Smith colored to go to Troy High. But because both Baker and Smith split, we could not color code them. That would be great.
It's a very different, like,
I can
you're
read it.
selling,
It was on the same one.
but this is like, this is.
I've never noticed that every time I've looked at this.
You need it.
I just noticed because I was like,
TMP's document.
Demand has been.
because I just thought people are gonna be like, are they changing something and something's, like, I just don't want people getting twitchy about something that has nothing.
Great feedback.
I'm trying to minimize the twitchy.
Nobody wants that.
As long as we're gonna replace something that they would wash. As long as we have, my dad's itching. You better choose the chicken for tomorrow. Sort of show me your next one. Period.
More nervous for them, not so much for him. Actually, here's why I'm so.
I don't know if you're selling trash, I said that always.
So Dean was leaving with Leo on Friday. And Stella was going to my mother and Stella.
Why are you still here?
She would dad was living in Canada.
We just got out.
And she does not feel okay about that. And she's like, I said, do you have any black before? She goes, but I've always had people. It's her first time alone though.
There's been a lot of
Also, it just shows that she loves it.
What is that? Same routine.
all of it. The largest thing every night.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Serious, which is very sensitive, but very diverse. And it's not a either.
maybe it's like, doesn't matter, it doesn't matter.
Never use water.
I'm getting, you know, my class.
I have a hole in mine, I know.
No matter where I want to go, the one thing I want to do is see my mom, and I can't even see her. When he was right there, I was talking to him about kind of going on so long, you know, I said, all these things are really done. Keep losing grip of it.
I do want.
Yeah, they want to talk to each other, but it's the court that doesn't want to talk to each other. And I think the court's completely wrong. Because this kid is completely fixated on that. Like, he can't think about anything else. It's like, let him talk to his mom, the supervised areas. And then we can work on him to start working on himself. But right now, he's completely fixated on that. The court says I can't talk to my mom. You know? His mom is a crazy alone. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Releasing her.
Feeling that she's capable of taking care of.
Right. Right. I mean, I wrote enough reports to the court last night. It was like, the number one thing I want to do is figure out a way to get a controlled environment where those two can talk to each other. Because you're not going to accomplish anything else with this kid until you can do that. And so there's that, and then he has to be done for 6 days. But he was so down that I actually sent him back to Children's Village and said, hey, he's on Stratera. Decided to Stratera here, you know, episode 6 about suicide and ideation. And I'm like, somebody here, I visited him 5 times in 2 weeks. Last night it was like, and I feel so despondent. And I'm like, you can't have a 14-year-old boy.
She's like, no, this is like.
It's a good one too, I was watching her right with it. That's right. A little.
I was on those toes my whole life. I don't know if I ever want to.
I was going to say, is that that's right here, right? Absolutely not.
Are we ready? Now you're coughing. I have to say something, now you're coughing. Dive in, I'll start choking on these.
Oh, no. All right, she's, ready? All right. So the purpose of tonight's conversation is a quick way to touch base. We're going to talk a little further about this from the lens of the strategic plan in November when we do the accountability plan. But Christina and I wanted to take some time to just hit the highlights of where we are with Portrait of a Learner and kind of just recap sort of where we are. If you remember way back in November of 21 when we talked about this in through the lens of the strategic plan. So we talked about different iterations of this strategic plan. We talked and called for student voice, and that's really kind of where this is situated. So it's not just kind of another piece of paper, another list of acronyms, but really something we take seriously about how we embed this into our day-to-day work. And so we've been working alongside of the board in coordination with all of you, obviously, in our community to think about ways that we can bring that Portrait of a Learner alive and well with our students. And so I think it's important to kind of reflect on where we've been. We talked, we did some learning with Tony Wagner and a lot of really exciting opportunities for our families that they were involved in. You can see on the timeline that we've outlined, we missed our mark in August, but way past that. But we were able to kind of walk the board through an iteration of what the Portrait of a Learner might look like. And I know the board has done a lot of work. We presented to us, and we didn't want to spit back out another presentation presenting the same thing back to you. We wanted to come up with where we are in our last phase here, which is talking about publishing and kind of looking at a graphic that we're able to interact with, and that's kind of what brings us here this evening. And I'll just show you and just speak to you. I'm going to read this word for word. It's kind of like us showing us the notes. I wanted to take a second and thank Kendra and the team. This is how we welcome Kendra to the group. Giving her 2 years worth of work process and initiation perhaps. So we was able to see where those traits that you had put together. I think there were, correct me if I'm wrong, 600 plus community members in the survey. Over 600 community members kind of being engaged. And I know the board took a lot of time in our schools, and that was been really exciting to think about what it means to be a learner here in Troy. And we did kind of make a pivot to portrait of a learner versus portrait of a graduate. And with the thought being that graduate kind of felt like one type of student, and we just wanted to make sure that we're communicating that this is an iterative process. And so this crosswalk, Christina, feel free to check in. We wanted you to be able to see where we whittled this down to 6, and we wanted you to see where those things land here. And so we just didn't want to make it a sweeping move. We wanted to make sure that you were able to see. We worked with our principals on this. We worked with our stakeholder groups. I know we kind of workshopped this in various entities to think about where would we land. And a little bit of the rationale behind where we did land with these 6 global competencies or characteristics is, number one, it whittles it down to make sure we're able to communicate them in a clear, concise way. But more importantly, we've been part of the work with Michael Cohen for several years now with the new pedagogy of deep learning, and they've done an incredible amount of work on developing not only these traits, but tools that we can work with afterwards. And we think that we felt that the work of the board would be honored within these characteristics, and that we're able to then take this and, most importantly, integrate this with children and help kids. They have self-assessment tools. They have tools for us to use at the leadership level, with school improvement, and ways that we can make sure that this is assessed. And I think that's my biggest takeaway from their work with Tony Wagner is this is really situated within our assessment suite. It's not just looking at standardized tests, but kids being able to display these traits in various ways, like portfolios or learning walks, that you'll be able to observe ways that will really shift our organization that kids can work with. I think that's probably the most powerful rationale that we have on our end, that we have a partner, and we're very clear on what character means. We're very clear on what a citizen means, or being creative means. We can all have different definitions of that. We provided a rubric just on the character piece, and in November, we intend to kind of share with you some really amazing student portfolio pieces, and it's always exciting to see the student voices come alive, but to be able to show kind of this in action. So this is just one example, but it's very robust, and we feel really that this is a really important part of our work, and it helps us go deeper versus taking 5 years to create a rubric of our own. I think it's really important. So again, that allows us to have students self-reflect, our leadership teams reflect, and then for us to reflect on the system as a whole. So Christina, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
I think when you look at the crosswalk, which is that large document, that what we were hoping to do, as Chris talked about, was take the competencies, the 6 global competencies, and then connect them to the language that you provided to us as a board on what you heard in your summary that you presented to us, what those findings were. And then that next grayed out, those few columns that are grayed out, those are the definitions of each one of those words from NPDL. So when we look at research-based best practice and how they have defined that language, we wanted to provide you with kind of a crosswalk of our understanding. So if you just follow character across, connected to tenacious and self-starter from the feedback from the conversation we had with you as a board, and then the competency descriptors from NPDL, they're in gray, followed by student language, which I know is a really important thing. And I remember, Carla, you saying, I want students to be able to say, as a portrait of a learner, I am, and then being able to complete that sentence. So what are you trying to do? And so that student-facing language is in that golden column, and then again followed by some more of the competency descriptors. So it's a large document, but the purpose of it was really to just try to put into a chart the thinking that has gone on, to try and connect all of the different pieces so that we could ultimately make use of it in our district, our teachers and our students, and use these rubrics to be able to give feedback throughout the process. So I just wanted to kind of draw some connections to what this large document is doing.
So one of the other pieces that I think is really exciting when we talked about the bond work in terms of our next just a different lens to how we're creating spaces or even hosting meetings or working with children or adults. So I think that's an exciting component, and we look forward to being able to see, kind of being able to showcase and work with our teams as to how all of these things kind of, we bring all these pieces together. We have a strategic plan, we have the 4 pillars, how does that all work together with these traits? And so that's something we'll be deliberate about with our team in November. The next piece is thinking about how, I mentioned this already, but how this impacts our assessment system. So not just looking at SAT, and I know that is on the same kind or a standardized assessment at STEP, for example. But this is really having students have the opportunity to showcase these traits, but through the lens again of portfolio or however they choose to, perhaps at the school. So we look forward to our next steps, but we really respond with the touch base and have this kind of interaction tonight to just let you know where we are as a snapshot in the process.
Questions? Two?
You know, I just have a comment, I was gonna bring this up around table, but I think it's here. So I'm super excited. I mean, first of all, the TFPD has new leadership, which now gives us the opportunity to really have a more meaningful integrated partnership with the district. And so we are currently working on, this is TFP, we've never had kind of a strategic brainstorming session. We had one of those, it was very fruitful, because we were looking at how we want to reimagine these teacher grants. And so we are working hard to pilot a program that allows for grants to be, we call them teacher facilitated student-led, that again ties into the different pillars of our strategic plan. They can be, and they have to be collaborative, student teams, and they can be, so we've got some examples of what us, and the end result of these are I'm gonna call them projects that make a difference, or kind of like impact projects to the community or some group external to themselves. And so Jennifer probably asked you a portrait of the graduate, because we're kind of putting together the draft of what the proposal would look like, and we're very interested in having, so our vision is that the teacher would fill out the proposal, but would use student voice, and we're going to scrap the idea of it has to be a handwritten application. It could be video, it could be a combination of different media to kind of explain, to describe the project. But we're really interested then in the inclusion of student voice, so we can understand what does this project mean to the students, how do students take charge of their own learning in this, what is the outcome, and how does it, and we want to tie it back to, for right now as a placeholder, we're doing 6 C's, but how would it tie back to that portrait of the learner? And so it's an opportunity for TFEE money to be used in the classroom to further
Reinforce these tenets.
to reinforce these tenets and give teachers and students some money to be able to execute an impact project. And an interesting thing is, because we're kind of talking a little bit about the innovation plan, what we like to propose there is in May, we have a big community show where,
All the
students-
grantees.
Yes, where students will come and share their projects, and make it a celebration of learning. So this
Donate to the TFE.
Yeah.
and this is a
Over
great,
and over
yeah,
and
this
over
is like
again,
a
yeah.
50 fundraiser, so.
This could be something great for, at least at the middle school level, with the web program, because you already have, at least in the first year, you have a lot of that. And so you have the kids that
So before preschool was like, school, students. And it, you know, there were lots of interesting examples of student, of this happening in the classroom. That, you know, again, for some teachers, this will be a no-brainer. For other teachers, I mean, have to watch and give you examples of some things that go. I am super excited because I think this year, just because of the timing, what we're looking at is sort of doing a hybrid, so we're doing these projects that make a difference, but some traditional teacher grants. But our vision is ultimately to move everything to, you know, this project-based learning. And there were some examples because we've been studying what some other schools and some other organizations are doing. And we're giving examples. It could be as simple as, you know, one classroom or group of students, you know, so it doesn't have to be a whole classroom. It could be students and groups deciding, you know, we're going to write thank you letters to first responders, and they're going to give you $50 for stamps and cards or something. Whereas you might have another version of that product of, you know, we're going to go interview first responders. We're going to learn about their jobs. We're going to publish their stories, you know, and we're going to create, you know, a nice video or a book or something that highlights, you know, the wonderful things these folks are doing in our community. So, you know, we're trying to give them different examples of, you know, kind of getting their toes wet versus, you know, and we're taking off any limits in terms of your money can only be $500. So sort of like dream big and we'll see what we can do. So we are so excited. This is finally,
And so alignment, as you
yes,
mentioned.
it's finally aligned instead of this group. Because TFP has a fair amount of money. You know, they've been fortunate in terms of getting some, you know, state gifts and stuff. And, you know, what they were doing was fine, but it was kind of, you know, it still reminded me of the idea of, you know, the district of schools. So we have all these random projects. In and of themselves, these projects are good, but nothing ties together to now doing a very, you know, kind of strategically aligned.
And for impact, right? I think that's another big shift where kids are driving it and it's meant to be empowering them to impact their world.
Yeah, so anyways, I'm really excited how this will come together with this, and stay tuned.
We look forward to showcasing some of those examples again too. We have some students in the makerspace, for instance, who just approved pianos not too long ago at the elementary level, and some of the students are interested in taking part of the 40-year-old piano over at Costello that's not working in a makerspace, so all sorts of drones or goes on.
That's awesome.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
It's
We're so
gonna get thrown
excited
away
about
anyway,
that.
you might as well.
Figure out how it works, you know, the dissection.
So again, more to come in at the accountability, but we just want to commit to our timeline. We were already in August, so.
So, you know, I had said to this broader group that, you know, be prepared. What we're showing you is going to get twisted and stuffed into a new thing. There are a couple of areas that I feel shoehorned, and I don't, other than putting our word here, I don't see it reflected in the actual rubric. And I just, there's 4 areas for me. I don't know if anybody else knows. Organize to me gets lost. Organize, once you go past the word communication, it doesn't feel like it fits under that category at all, and I think it gets lost. And it was a major thing. You know, it was a thing in itself. I almost feel like that goes, it might even fit better under critical thinking, right? Which is how can you go through and do this if you're so disorganized you don't get it. But so that's an area where I'm not sure where it fits, but I feel I'm just going to point out areas where I feel like there's a significant sentiment that's lost in the translation, from my perspective, and I just want to make sure that if it's not in the title, it's covered somewhere in the rubric, right? So the other one was joy. You know, we have creativity, but I don't feel the 6 C's has joy in it. I've always felt that way when I look at the 6 C's. 6 C's is about work. It's about work, right? It's about getting stuff done and things you got to do. Check. I don't want to say check the boxes, but it's the 6 C's has always felt very task-driven to me, And some of the things that we want to see is, at the end of the day, do I have students who are filled with joy? And that may be, it doesn't go into this rubric at all, but it still may be, like I said to the group, we had a governance level maybe holding up the original 12 tenets saying as we evaluate things to say, are we seeing those things? Because you don't teach joy, but maybe we want to make sure. Joy is an outcome, right? And that's something we can observe, right? We can see, I certainly saw that like in the summer learning lab, right? The joy in that room among those learners, and it's like, so we don't have to say, we're gonna teach you joy today.
Yeah.
But it's.
More measured on a rubric.
Yeah, more measured on a rubric, right? How wide is your smile? So so I'm okay if that, maybe it doesn't go in there. So I guess my other thing is, either it fits, or we say it doesn't really fit, it's not something we're gonna drive, then I'm okay with us taking it out of there, even if we at a governance level say, we're still looking for joy, you know, at the end of the day. Connect It was another one of those where that was something that was really big with the kids, and it's very specific, right? It's about, what am I doing here in the classroom, and how does it relate to what I'm gonna do later? I don't understand the relationship between chemistry class and my career, right? And that's not collaboration at all. Like the sentiment for that idea doesn't belong anywhere near collaboration, because it's about, that's
I'm
more.
glad you explained that, because I'm thinking connected is sense of belonging.
Oh, no, you're right.
You know, so.
Visionary was the one, I'm sorry. I had that's the one I circled.
Okay.
Sorry, I meant visionary.
Okay.
That's what I needed.
I'm back,
But
sorry.
visionary is one where, like, again, it's like, it's under critical thinking, but that's one where I feel like, I wanna make sure that somewhere in a rubric we're talking about that, so the teachers understand that and that goes back to our pillars, right? Which is connecting my learning to real life. And so where is that in the 6 C's? Where do we have anywhere in the 6 C's where it says connecting my learning to real life?
And maybe
It's probably in there and I don't know it, but I just want to make sure.
Well, I wonder
that-
if it's more citizenship than, because like it's the idea of like, how do I connect what I'm doing to the bigger picture? I mean, it's shoehorned there too.
Yeah,
but
it still
it's
feels
more-
shoehorned, but,
Those are good.
and then the other, Connected was the one that, okay, Connected I have circled for a different reason, and that is, that was very specific about, I want to build meaningful personal relationships with the adults and other students, right? And that's the social emotional area, and maybe citizenship, if we're gonna shove it in somewhere, it feels like probably citizenship should be there, but, if it's there, somewhere in the rubric, I feel like we need to explain what that means, because otherwise it'll just be lost. It's just an extra word that came off one of our slides and we tucked it in here, but we don't have, it doesn't translate into what a teacher does.
So these are more like this rubric right here. I think
This
this
one
is
here?
just one example.
Oh.
These, I just want to make sure that's really helpful feedback, but this
Yeah.
isn't, these are far more descriptive when you get the full,
Yeah.
you know, the expanded version, if you will, but we'll make sure those are noted and.
Yeah, so that was the
Now
only
we
thing.
can add to it also.
And part of that, again,
Make it our own.
Nancy over there said outcomes, right? We're looking at outcomes as opposed to the process to get there. And so that's why I'm very comfortable to say, if you look at this and go, you know, we're shoehorning it, it doesn't fit, and it isn't something we're gonna teach, it's gonna be an outcome, then I'd be like, keep it out of there then. And we'll hold it in our original thing, and when, you know, we can look in the end and say, did we get there, right? But if we think it's part of this, then I wanna make sure that we're describing it so
Yeah.
our staff understands that it's important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Really helpful.
I'm gonna say, I really like changing it to learner, like that's, I really like the portrait of a learner vocabulary. And I really appreciate the character group, like this, like in that rubric, I think is really nice for giving people, and some of that vocabulary and the ideas that we had said, like using the I vocabulary. So like, I can describe, I know what I'm interested in, I can do, like, I think those are really good statements to give to kids, so I think that stuff I all really like with partnering with the MPDL.
Yes.
But like Carl had said, the idea of knowing how to do project management, like that was something that we heard at so many grade levels, so
Like
that.
organizing, is that what it's?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
just kids saying like, I wanna know how to take a big task and break
Break
it
it
into
down.
pieces and know that I can do a big task over time.
And the parents begging us, please stop.
The parents beg, the kids beg for it, you know, when I talk to people who are social workers in schools, and I'm talking about like kids needing more executive functioning help, like I feel like there's a lot of places where people are saying, this is something we really need to see. And so like saying visionary and critical thinking, like I would, and maybe when the rubric is more broken out, maybe it has more of those pieces and they're just not here, but none of that is listed in these grade descriptors. And so
Right.
like, I just wanna make sure that.
And it doesn't feel like communication at all.
Right, yeah, and so like I wanna, yeah, like it doesn't feel like it's and so I just wanna make sure that we're really helping, that we're really intentional about, because that is something I think is taught.
Right.
But you know what? To me, when you say organized, it's different than what you got. What kids wanna know is how do I get things done? How do
Right,
I-
I'm thinking like
how-
organized is
how do I
like
execute?
Right, no, that's what, and that's what, I was never thrilled with the word organized in the
Right,
first place for that.
project management makes.
Yes, we kind of
Yeah.
describe, in the descriptor, we call it a sort of project management,
Yeah.
right? That's where the project
How do
management
you-
goes.
how do you get things
Right.
done?
Yeah, this isn't, I don't care if they can keep a Google Calendar, like, I care that
Right.
they know
Okay.
how
I
to.
think
That's helpful.
organized is, I mean,
I'm not
some
sure
of
where
the
it goes.
best people I see execute stuff don't look very organized. They
Yeah.
have piles of
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Right, but they have a system,
But
right?
they have a system.
Producer,
Producer.
yeah, I mean, I don't I don't wanna lose that.
Chaos, but it gets things done, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
You know, there are people who get results, get
Yeah.
stuff done. They know how to.
And maybe that's under tenacious self-start,
Yeah.
self-starter, maybe it belongs more under
I mean,
there, right?
I don't care where it goes.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that, it's just an idea that I don't wanna lose, just
Yeah.
because it was something that people really talked about.
Because we heard it from every single group, like,
Yeah.
there wasn't a single group that wasn't like, I need help with executive function, whatever verb you wanna,
Got it.
label you wanna get it. And then I do think Carl's points about how does what I'm doing today connect to what I'm gonna do in the future? And as I talk to high schoolers right now that are thinking about their future, there has been so much, you're getting prepared for a job that hasn't even been invented yet, that
Yeah.
they feel so lost, like they don't feel rooted in anything. And so like, how do we help these kids feel rooted in something tangible, even though we want to give them the ability to pivot to something new? And so I don't know how the wording of that goes, but I wanna make sure that,
Yeah.
that we're
By the
giving.
time you get to here, that it's captured,
Yeah.
somewhere.
And then we're
Yeah.
giving kids the freedom to dream about anything being possible, but not so much freedom that they just, they feel
Don't
like.
explore, right.
Yeah.
They go in the
Yeah.
basement and don't come out,
And I think that actually ties to the project management piece, like it's, I think they're connected, I just don't know where they are.
Sure, it's helpful to have this before we.
So, but I do, like, I really like with help I can identify, I can identify, I understand it, I mastered it, like I love the
I like
progression.
leaning into, to your point, let's not spend 5 years developing our own
Right.
evaluations, or we've got good evaluations,
Yeah,
let's just
this
lean
is-
into them. If we think they apply, let's use them.
Right.
So there's a lot of really beautiful stuff here, so
You know, and I'm not surprised, I assume you probably folded into 6Cs in some way, so it's just, in my mind, I'm like, okay, let's figure out how it goes, and let's just make
Honestly,
sure.
I think we're in a much different place than we were 9 years ago when we thought the 60 rubric, when we
Yeah.
looked at these things like, oh my gosh, it's just a lot of words. And I think we're situated with our mission, our vision, values, goals, and now we can kind of digest and think differently with our students.
This feedback.
And I love this.
Yeah, it'll help, thank you. And like I said, I'm totally comfortable with, there's some element of that first presentation that just stays with the board, at this level, this is what we're looking for, and that's what we're looking for. But it's not a matter of knowing that we're not gonna teach joy.
Right. But I think going back to Tony Wagner's sort of the idea that there will be joy represented in learning celebrations and things like that.
Yeah,
When kids are being able to.
I'm not worried
present.
about that at all. I mean, when I see where we're moving and I see some of the best examples we have of educational outcomes, it's what the kids talk about. That's what gives them joy.
Right.
We know what gives kids joy, so we just know that we're gonna lean into that, so.
See it every time in a board meeting, or a student spotlight, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you.
This is a lot.
This is hard, it's like, we knew that there's a lot of folding going on, and more
Back
done.
and forth. We appreciate your encouragement as well.
And make sure to, and it was referenced at the beginning, to thank Kendra as well for jumping on this midstream and
Yes.
really owning it.
Jumping
helping
in,
to own
capturing
that.
us. Yeah,
Capturing
exactly.
it.
Mhm.
Okay, that takes us out of it, I think we're good. Anything? Okay.
One, I wanna, thank Kendra and everybody who worked on the parent survey for the calendar that went out last Friday. So I know I've talked to lots of parents over the last 3, 4, 5 years. So I'm grateful that, we do have a survey out, so this is a chance for the community to give feedback as we head into, negotiations and figure out where our school calendar will be in the future. I do want to say, I love some of the new communication, the newsletter, some of the things on the website. I know I always magically have to figure out where school pay is, and I was able to find it relatively quickly yesterday. I did want to say, and I mentioned this before also, if we could get something on the website, we had on our board calendar, we had one of the homecomings. I was trying to figure out what the second one was, and it wasn't on there. I went on the district website, and I couldn't figure out which Jordan High homecoming was. So I think it would be good for at least some of, if there was some type of district calendar that could more easily be assessed with some of the events that are going on in the district.
Yeah, that's a common problem for me.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to find something.
Um,
And then I know that's hard. There's a lot of moving pieces to try to get into a calendar, but yeah, to the extent that we can do that.
And then the other thing, so next month, we're gonna get some information, feedback on some of the assessment testing, like MSEP and all of that. I've had people reach out to me. I think some of the things that I'd like to know is that information is presented to us. People have inquired whether or not we can do some type of comparison between the kids who did the math pilots last year and the kids who did not. I'm not even sure that we can get information at that granular level, whether it even makes sense, for the nature of our pilot. But I think it's worthwhile addressing that question and saying, one, can we even get information on that granular level? And
Yeah.
then two.
I talked to Chris about that too, that we have, at the elementary level, we have 2 buildings that went to bridges at 100%.
Yeah.
That has to be interesting to look at those 2 buildings versus the other 10.
So I think, at the middle school too, whether it's possible, and that's a whole building.
Right,
and
I was gonna say, who knows, we
Yeah.
got enough data on the other stuff, but I just, at the
I think it's
elementary
even
level,
worth-
we
yeah.
might have enough data actually to.
Yeah, but I think it's worth saying, we can
Yeah.
look at information at that granular level, we cannot, so people understand. And then also, whether or not it makes sense to look at last year, in terms of the middle school math. And then the other thing that I'm interested to see, especially when you look at ELA and math, there's, 4 different things that are being tested. And so it's not just ELA, it's research and it's reading and it's all those various components. So what I'm interested to see is, a kid can do great in 3 and not well in 1, and it alters the results. So is there something where, 1 of the 4 or 2 of the 4, is there something where we're not performing as well that might be, I don't want to say skewing the results, but that might be altering or affecting, having a greater effect on the overall score? So that's something that I would like to, that's information I would like to see and understand if there's one component that's more affecting our scores than another. So that's on MSTEP. And then I had something, and this is, because I'm experiencing it as a parent, and I talked to other parents who are similarly as confused or by it. So once the kids enter 8th grade, or even before 8th grade, if they're taking what are considered high school level classes, those count towards your high school GPA. One, I think it would be, and I don't know whether this is something that's presented to, parents of incoming 9th graders. Certainly this is something that I think needs to be addressed with parents of incoming 8th graders to really understand what the scoring is. So I was surprised when I went to curriculum night that an A, whether, it's an A minus, an A or an A plus, is a 4.0, a B, whether it's a B minus, B or B plus is a 3.0. It was not that way when I was in school. It was much more granular. So I want to really, I think there might be some needs for parents to really understand, one, how the grading works. And then two, my understanding is, from some information.
Just a bit of clarity, beyond what you learned at curriculum night, like.
Right, so, yeah.
Or even have it like.
But it
published.
was in curriculum night, it was a passing comment from the teacher.
Okay.
So it wasn't, this isn't something, so it was,
So you don't really have that
it's all new
codified
to
anymore.
me because I'm the parent of an 8th grader. I think, but that's typically the first time parents are hit with this information, unless a kid is, I think, more advanced in math and they're taking algebra 1 in 6th or 7th grade. So I think that's something that, and I know that grading is kind of a mystery to the parents too, especially because the grade point averages are calculated much differently than they were, in my time. But I think also understanding what affects how the classes that you take in middle school, even though they actually count towards your high school GPA, how those actually get factored into college application. Because it creates a lot of stress when that is a part of your high school GPA. But, Carl, I know that you reached out to some universities, and then I know I've talked to other parents when their kids have applied to college, nobody looks at your middle school grades because most other districts do not include that in the GPA. And so universities have to normalize what they're looking at, and some universities don't even look at 9th grade grades, and I would say most look at 9, 10, 11, and 12th grade grades. So I think even for kids and for parents to understand, because I think it can be really scary for, you're in 8th grade, you haven't hit high school yet, and all of a sudden you're taking 1 or 2 classes that count towards your GPA. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding among parents where all of that.
Like for math, that counts towards Michigan merit, right? But the university won't necessarily look at that when they recalculate your high school GPA.
Michigan merit either, because you still have to take another math. It's goofy the way
It does count.
Well, but it
Yeah.
doesn't count as you graduate. I mean, if you take algebra in 8th grade, you still have to take 4 years of math in high school regardless.
You can take 3 as long as you take 1 during the second semester of your senior year. So you could take a year, so typically students who take advanced math don't not take math in high school.
But
Because they're
theoretically, you
math,
could take your
right.
senior year off.
No,
They're
you
not
can
allowed
take
to
your
take
junior
it.
year off or the first semester of your senior year, but a
Okay.
Michigan merit requires seniors to have a math-related experience the second semester of senior year.
Oh, okay. So you would theoretically take a year off, but
Except
They're
it's not
taking
gonna
algebra in
take
8th grade.
they're not doing that.
Right, we don't, it doesn't typically
But to your point, it's
But I think even for, especially
A
for
primer of
a
this
lot of
might
8th
actually
grade,
help.
yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
even
it's
for a
like-
lot of 8th grade parents, you're being hit with this, but you don't really understand what any of it means. And maybe
Right.
it's addressed more with parents of incoming 9th graders.
I mean, it's a very good point.
No one ever explained GPA to me. I just figured it out by looking at my kids' transcripts.
But even the idea of, universities recalculating and what the university looks at versus what Michigan America requires and things like that, you're right, it wouldn't
But
hurt
I
to
think
have
it's,
that.
I mean, I think it's fair to
Sounds legal.
understand, because this was all new to me, I talked to some friends who have high school kids, some, little kids who have gone off to college, and they said it was kind of a mystery. So I think it's one of those things that parents should at least understand, at least before their kids, go off to ninth grade, but if not, even before.
So I'd characterize it as, where do parents hear about grading related to high school courses, especially, when in middle school?
Yeah.
Eighth grade.
Should be enough for
Perfect.
tonight.
You got anything?
No, I feel like I emailed all my issues over time. Good.
How about you?
You already shared your main new thing, but.
I always, I guess the other thing when we're talking about the Michigan gap, because we're chatting now about the widening gap between shortcoming and scores, and I think we definitely need to look at that and bring it around.
Right. It's frustrating because moving into COVID, we were closing the gap. We had 6 consecutive years where we were closing the gap, and then coming out of COVID, it's like, wow, it's opened back up again. And it's like, okay, why did one high school maintain and the other one fall down?
And so I think we need to understand.
Well, not fall down.
But our intent is to, have excellent opportunities in all of our
I was gonna mention the calendar survey too. I just wanna know if we had a lot of responses or.
From the survey, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right, cool.
So, and I
Wanna make sure
just
that-
shared it out today, with families again, so hopefully we'll get more.
Thank you for putting that
Yeah,
out. I'm
thank you.
excited to see what it says.
And then for the sex education committee, I know we were looking for clergy. Did we get any applications for that? Or, I know we sent them.
I'm not sure I have to follow up, but I can follow up. Those applications don't go to me, but I can find out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
And actually, the only thing I've got is I'm going to build on what you had said, which was planning to reach out to her to say, if, and I'll still do it, so you don't have to remember time, because we're all time, but knowing that, we can dissect MSTEP for 32 days straight, are there some key things that you would like us to explore, have presented to us, or topics for the November workshop? I think one of the things we did last year, we looked at trying to streamline to say, okay, we recognize that these standardized, especially at a state level, these standardized tests are not really driving the work here very much, right? But at the same time, they are a snapshot in time, and there are probably some things that would be more valuable to look at than others. And I guess, my own sense is I would like to look to you and your team to say, okay, these are the numbers that probably are most helpful for us when it comes to diagnosing and moving forward or improving, right? And I really like our conversation in November to concentrate on those things. I don't think we need to report numbers to ourselves, right? So, you and I have had this conversation before, and it's, my obsession with bad data. So, I want to make sure that we're being selective,
Right.
and careful, and purposeful in terms
talking about the
of.
stuff that matters.
Yeah, talking about the stuff that matters and that can actually impact our practice, right? That's what I want to focus on. Because even when I looked at, I looked at our percentiles and said, okay, well, when you do the percentile ratings, you say at the elementary level anyway, and like we're all through middle school actually, it's like, okay, we're looking really good. And then when I looked at, okay, we're 96 percentile, and my question is, who are the 4% who are doing better than we are? And then when I look and see that most of those are obscure charter schools, where I go, well, you're lopping off the bottom 40% of your kids. So I'm more looking at, are there other districts that are similar to us or have a demographic profile that maybe is less privileged than ours? And if they're meeting or exceeding us, then I would say that we might be able to learn something. I know when you looked at some of the early data, you were looking, saying that the other schools are using the same programs we are, right? In a couple of those areas. But I think the percentile is a good way to look at this, because it at least narrows down what you're looking at, right, for some of this stuff. But the other thing to me is, to your point about is the value of looking at the components of an ELA score and saying, do we have anything that's systematically weaker than the other links within ELA? That to me is at least valuable because it impacts practice. So I don't think we need to feel like, I just don't want your team to feel like we've got to be able to cover this entire broad area. It's like, let's go through and focus on the things that we think we can actually impact.
Yeah, okay.
So that's all. Yeah, so, and then I would say again, so with that in mind, if there's some specific things that you would like to see, shoot them over to me, and I'll send out an email to everybody, but everyone send to me, and then I'll filter back to these folks, and then they'll make sure that they've got those questions incorporated in the presentation. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So we're good with just one workshop or just one meeting? Just be a workshop. Just be a workshop.
Yes, it'll just be a workshop. Right? We promise. We don't have to buy anything, right? In November. Okay, and like I said, worst case scenarios, we can schedule a special meeting on the same night as the workshop if we need to vote on, if he needs a signature.
We'll be doing that anyway because we will likely be going into closed
Yeah.
session.
Oh, right, okay,
We'll do a
okay.
closed session on negotiations because we'll have financials, parameters that we recommend, that we're ready to recommend.
Okay.
And Rich, if I can, just one other issue that may come up, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, we have to buy additional server storage that I'm working with technology on doing so. I don't know if it'll be ready by then. If not, we'll wait till December.
Okay. All right. Well, again, anything time sensitive, you can figure it out. But from a workload perspective, we can cover it under one night as we go through. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know.
We had talked about inviting the
right.
board reps to come in November because we don't have a meeting, so that they could see a workshop. So if we're gonna do a closed session, is it possible to do it at the end? But I know if Gary Collins is coming,
We could just bump back there, let them know that we're gonna start later. We can give them a later time. Or you think you
Well, we
get
had
a late?
we had invited them to come for dinner so that they could
Oh,
actually
right, yeah, we did.
get to know people, but then I don't want to invite them to dinner and then be like.
Go do your homework. Oh, we can speak, go do your homework.
We could do closed session dinner.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah, we could do that. We could do closed session at 5, dinner at 6.
And that's, I guess that's, if everybody can do closed session at 5, I don't know if that's fine, but, or if we need to just tell them, sorry, cheating, you're out of dinner, you can come at 7.
Yeah.
But I wanna make sure we communicate with them,
Okay.
because we can talk on workshops where fun happens.
Write it down as a.
Yeah.
I'm gonna rely on Judy to do
I got
this.
it.
Because I'm like, it sounds great, and I won't remember it tomorrow, so
I got it.
that's, okay. And we did ask them if they wanted to come for dinner. We thought it'd be a fun way for them to
Yeah,
get to
yeah.
know everybody. Okay.
They're
They're a really good group
enthusiastic
of 4. I was like, wow, these are really,
We got a lot of energy.
yeah, a lot of energy, very intrigued by the process of the meeting and everything
Very
else.
involved students.
So, and I encouraged all of them. I said, I tell students this every year, but they shy out on us. But I said, if we're having a topic and we're voting on it, when I say, are there any comments or questions, you can raise your hand and say, I've got a question or comment. And these ones were like, I'm gonna do that. Okay, yeah. So, but I think that's good. I think it'll add to create richer conversations. So have a voice at the table. Okay, then I don't think I have anything.
Just a couple, SAT
yeah,
launch
sorry.
on Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Ribbon cutting launch on Friday, so a couple of you have indicated. Nicole, you said you'd be there, and Nicole, okay, great. We're gonna have, it's gonna be a really nice program in the media center.
For the grant.
It's exciting,
Yes, yes. I'm sorry.
But it'll be good. We're gonna have a good crowd, and they're really, as we folks are really excited about it, so. Rainbow's all set to go with that, or will be set to go. In case you didn't see Banded is, that is the joint band program, it's a joint marching band program, so Athens and Troy High will do their halftime shows. That's Wednesday night at Athens at 8 o'clock. This Wednesday at Athens at 8 o'clock. So if you get a chance to get up and see the football games and where you see the halftime shows, it's an opportunity to come and and see both on the same evening. And it's a short evening because their shows are only 15 minutes-ish, so they'll both do their shows. Staff and PTO or fall updates start this week, so those will be launching, and then Troy Homecoming is Friday.
Yeah, who's
Otherwise,
the
it'll
parade
be
Friday?
Friday.
You're not in the parade?
I've got 800 women from around the world coming to Detroit.
Oh.
Tonight.
Oh, tonight, no, no.
Hopefully they all make it.
No, who's the parade with me for Troy High? Okay.
Sorry about that.
Are you in the parade?
No.
What is the problem, man? This is like you're missing the most fun thing you can do as a board member.
I was not
Four bags
mindful.
of candy.
I have 600 pieces of candy. I am determined to not run out of
I know
candy.
next year I'm gonna write them down on my calendar, so that I just plan.
Yeah, I went to Costco and found these giant things of Smarties. I'm like, Smarties, perfect. I almost took out some eyes with Tootsie Pops.
There's just, it's just, like, when they go to the Tootsie Pops, it's like, I don't want to throw sticks at kids, like, I'm like throwing them on the ground, I'm like, watch out for those sticks.
It will also.
Okay, so it's the three of us then.
Celebrating people's
Okay.
birthday.
And then
You don't need it,
Oh, yeah, so, yeah,
Need
let's,
it,
we'll
need
meet,
it. and then, or sorry.
no, we meet at Tri-High, yeah, we can meet at certain Carmel.
Yeah. No, it was perfect.
You can park in my house and walk.
Yeah, no, I know, that's
October 13th is the Troy High Athens Housetown rival game. That's at Athens this year, and they'll also be celebrating the 50th anniversary as part of that. So.
And then Nate Levinson, it looks like our discussion got shifted from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock on that Monday for the special ed, the focus group. And October 16th,
Yeah,
the three of us are together.
Yeah.
I just, Nate sent a new today in my mailbox, it was, can you do 6 p.m.? And I looked and you were the other two people on that. So I don't, we were all signed up for 3 p.m. on that Monday. So if you can't do it, we'll reschedule.
Like, day by day.
Yes, there is. Okay. Yeah, 3 o'clock was perfect for me too. So if you can't do it, we'll just go back to them and we'll find another time that we can do it. So, and who are you with?
I'm with Gary, Monday morning.
1 o'clock or 1 o'clock.
You must be a one-on-one.
You're with Patel.
Oh,
you're with
I thought it was
okay.
Tuesday.
Yeah, you're with Patel on Tuesday, because I was supposed to be on Tuesday, but I can't do Tuesday because I got
He
Rose
didn't have a
can,
note
Rose can
with-
help you if you need to reach out to them or reschedule it. Rose can help.
Rose, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, because he didn't have a note with it, it just showed up as a new meeting notice, and I guess no, can you do 6 o'clock? So if you guys will say no, then just log in and say, and check no, and then you'll have to come back and we'll find it. Or I'll join Matt's group if you guys are. Never mind. Okay, that's it, thank you. Are you asleep? Are you?